Chapter 620 Betrayal. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr e/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. So, you've taken the contract. Serana couldn't stand being snuck at from behind as she watched Amon Modier and his guard leave. The fact that the one who snuck on her was John made it even worse since Serana was sincerely pissed at the moment. Bastard. Whoa. Different from her aloofness, this Serana seemed to be aggressive and on fire. Cute little fangs, what has gotten into you? John evaded her claws with ease. You, bastard. You put that thing in me, she said as she vigorously attacked him with her claws left and right. I'm sure I didn't. John held his laughter as he replied. Lair, if I ever did, you'd be thanking me by now. Serana stopped as she furrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? She asked in confusion. The thing I put in. John was about to reply as he pointed toward his thing, but he became confused midway. What are you talking about? Serana traced where John was pointing and looked at him with unamused eyes. Whoops, John replied with a sly smile. Serana immediately stopped her tantrum and turned away as she transformed into a swarm of bats and flew away from him. Being upset, huh? All right, let's see how long you can play. John sneered and immediately started flying after her. Serana's flight speed was much higher than John's since her innate ability of a vampire lord was so powerful, but John compensated for the speed difference between flying and levitating by overcharging his magicka. As the two flew, Serana noticed John's presence drawing closer, and it suddenly became dangerous to stay. Buzz! A blade of aura flew past her swarm form as it almost put a wound on her, which caused Serana to pause her flight and focus on where it came from. John was currently hiding in the night sky between the fog and clouds, and his presence became distorted. Come out, she shouted. Strunbach Huo, John replied, but his voice echoed in the sky and made it go upset. Serana looked left and right and felt the agitation in the weather while trying to remember what those words meant. She knew that in the dragon language, SDRUN means storm and BH is probably anger, which means crackle. Serana always knew that thunder would always come after lightning, but this time she witnessed it all up close as a storm was suddenly brewing in the clouds around. You madman, she uttered in fear. Bingo, John replied as he was right behind her. She looked behind, but the horror she saw was that of a dragon head staring down at her through the clouds. Lightning struck again, and the heavens were illuminated with the sight of John standing where that mirage of a dragon was. The bolt of lightning rushed toward John as he raised his fist and descended towards Serana. Serana raised her arms in a desperate defense. The lightning hit John's fist, and boom, thunder cookie. The heaven turned silent, and the storm was shattered. John created a storm with his voice and shattered it with his bare hand. The fist which he used to do so just passed Serana's head, and its force exploded an inch away from her. She fell into a complete mess, and she lost all her power to fall down from the sky. John, whose hands were still smoking, watched the vampire girl fall from the sky with cold eyes before he gave a long sigh. That was the stick, and this is the carrot. John disabled his spell and made a free fall right after her. Fixing his aerodynamics, he caught up to her in mere seconds. Seeing how she lost her strength and gave up on facing him, he knew he finally got to her. Serana may be a cute millennium-old vampire girl, but deep in her head, she is someone who suffered and developed a rebel personality. He held her west as they fell, and their long hair fluttered behind them as the world turned upside down in a scenery where they swirled together as if dancing on a floor made of stars. John didn't let go, and she opened her eyes once she felt him. Do you hate me? He asked. Serana didn't reply and gave up on resisting him. I don't own you, Serana. I don't control you. Really? She finally spoke as she asked. Her attitude was a sign of her displeasure with what John did to her by putting a piece of gluttony inside her head. She who suffered from a blood parasite the most is the last person who wants to be exposed to that thing again. I'll make it up for you, John said, and exposed his neck to her. Serana was aware of how dangerous John's blood can be since he has a bizarre ability to control his own blood, even if it goes outside his body. The ability makes him the bane to all vampires. However, his blood was something that can't be compared to the blood of any other mortal. She took John for his offer, and, as she took a bite, the two of them continued falling down the sky all the way down into the Karth River, right next to Dragonbridge. The storm has long since settled, but the rain continued to fall during the night, and the two barely made it out of the river. Serana was crawling on her knees, and John walked out of the river right after her. There was no one but them on the rocky riverside. "Monster," she said as she looked back at him. He stood over her with a smile of victory as blood dripped on his unusually long fangs. John's eyes took a different shape as well before suddenly turning back to normal. "Want to celebrate?" He lifted her up and pulled her closer. "Do I get to choose?" she asked as she dug her claws through the shirt into his skin. "Sadly, I'm getting hard already," he replied as he held her assassin robes from the shoulders. Serana tore his shirt from the front, drawing 10 lines of blood over her skin and watching it closely. John completely tore her robe and left her nude. Serana jumped on John and hugged his waist with her legs. "I won't lose again," she said. "Huh?" John laughed and looked the seducing vampire in the eyes. "You sure about that?" She, who decided to mate with him on a whim, seemed too confident this time, so she nodded. "Knock, knock," he said. She narrowed her eyes before replying. "Who's there?" she asked, but just a moment after, her eyes were wide open with shock. "Big boy dare." After a minor earthquake hitting Jalmarch last night, John and Serana decided to stop lazing around under the blue sky and near the river. John was enjoying a little sun bath as Serana laid down in the shadow not far from him. "You didn't have to tear my clothes into halves. I'm not good at mending things that are damaged." "It was worth it." "What was it?" "Seeing your boobies wiggle." John winked. "You're the enemy of all women indeed." She sighed. "Who said that?" he asked. "I've heard things when I went around investigating who you really are. As a person, I mean, things. You having a lot of lovers." "I wouldn't call them lovers," he said, "just some fellow Debella enthusiasts. People said a lot of things." She added, "All these women would thank me, you know." "What about the men?" she asked. "You." John almost covered his body. "God, no. I meant the men who settled in with these women afterward. They hate you." She said, "They could try the troll marrow extract. I have no secrets regarding that." John said, "Yeah, the men would go extinct hunting trolls." Serana replied sarcastically, "Or will it be the trolls? Neither is my problem. I use dragon marrow extract now." John laughed as he started to stand up and put on his pants. As he did so, he noticed some people hiding behind the rocks of the river. These happened to be some girls from the nearby town of Dragonbridge who came down to do the laundry. "Ladies," John smiled. Most of the girls cried in shame and covered their faces as they started running back to town. "They've been watching you for half an hour now," Serana added. "I always welcome the audience." John winked, "But I'm afraid this includes our meeting today. You vented your frustration and sexual tension, so you can hate me less now." "I'm sure you were the one venting all night," she replied. "Did I?" He tried to remember. "Anyway, you're the one who slept with the most handsome young man in the world. You can feel a little bit lucky." Serana opened her mouth in an attempt to retort at how shameless John was, but she ended up laughing in awe. He smiled at her as well, but she looked at his smile and realized that she was laughing at his jokes after she slept with him. She was angry at him, and somehow, he made her forget her anger. She wasn't particularly angry at John, but rather angry at a series of different situations and circumstances. She, a daughter of Cold Harbor, is a person who was meant to be traumatized from any sexual experience, yet somehow John, the one she was angry at, slipped past her defenses and acted the way he liked. Her smile disappeared afterward. "I have a question," she said. "Go ahead," John replied as he was done wearing his clothes. Am I someone you want to control? She asked. No, not at all, John casually replied. So, you have no qualms if I leave the Dark Brotherhood and ignore your missions, or whatever you call it? I don't, John replied. I prefer if you do it for me, as a favor. In order to show my appreciation to you, I will be at your beck and call. A favor it is, she said, then asked, but for how long? Until I have the Brotherhood around my finger. After that, you can expect anything from me. Thanks. I will hold you up to your offer one day, she said, and stood up as well. By the way, John continued, a band of vampire hunters called the Dawn Guard has been formed. They are hunting down the Fokihar clan. Best of luck to them. Serana walked past Job and put her hood on. Let's meet at their place after this is all over, shall we? John added. I don't mind. Serana didn't stop and traveled through the shade in her bat swarm form before disappearing in the shade of the Dragon Bridge. John donned his cloak and put his hood on, then started playing with his appearance a little using lust. His hair became black and his eyes turned gray. Then he added some age marks on his face and walked towards the town. In a matter of minutes, John was standing in the middle of town and Serana was already past the bridge. Both of them looked back towards where they expected the other to be. Serana suddenly raised her head up and struggled as her body started making strange noises. Her neck started to move unnaturally, and then her tongue stretched off her mouth. From her tongue, a ruby-like bead of crystallized blood appeared, and she let that bead slide down in a small flask. Well, she spoke in a grim but soft voice, I've got what I needed, John Dare. She closed the flask and hid it from sunlight, then started traveling. In the town, John made a wide sneer as his intentions couldn't help but to surface on his face. He stood in front of an imperial outpost of the Penitus Oculatus and slowly walked ahead to knock on the door. The door barely opened, and a man looked through the gap with his eyes. Name and purpose of visit. The man said, The name is Krylin the Mercenary. As for the purpose, the man's eyes widened for what John said next. I would like to report that I discovered the location of the Dark Brotherhood's hideout. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 14 chapters. Chapter 621, Appraising Values. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Falkreath, the Dark Brotherhood's Sanctuary. You're back. Astrid saw Serana in as the latter seemed to be absent-minded. Yep, Serana replied. And what? The Night Mother's contact. Tell me everything first. What did this Modier want? Astrid was personally waiting for Serana at the entrance of the sanctuary in order to hear the matter they were given by the matron of the cult. If it wasn't for that, Astrid would have had a relaxing afternoon rather than worrying about every little thing. I've met him, and Serana took a deep breath, showing that she was still shocked. Modier wants us to kill the Emperor. Astrid raised her brows with a neutral face before breaking into a smile and giving out a short laugh. You're joking, she said. Serana shook her head and handed over the letter she had and the amulet she was handed by Amon Modier. What is this? Astrid asked. The letter explains things. The amulet is the expenses. Serana replied. Astrid took the letter, retreated to a chair behind an old table, and brought closer a candle to read it. Serana joined her and waited a minute, 2, and 3 until Astrid read the paper carefully a few times at that. By Sid is, you're not joking, Astrid exclaimed, to kill the Emperor of Tamriel. The Dark Brotherhood hasn't done such a thing since the assassination of Pelagius. As a matter of fact, no one has dared assassinate an Emperor of Tamriel since the murder of Uriel Septim, and that was 200 years ago. You're going on this foolery? Serana asked. Do you even trust the Night Mother? Seeing that the listener herself is skeptical from the situation with the Night Mother. Astrid was for once baffled, but still determined to see this one through. The Night Mother wouldn't misguide the Dark Brotherhood on purpose. And, for whatever reason, she chose to relay Modier's information to you. I don't know exactly what's going on here, if you're the listener, or this is some fluke, or what. But what we now have before us, Astrid replied, waving the letter of Amon Modier. So, you're accepting the contract? Serana asked. Damn right I am. If we pull this off, the Dark Brotherhood will know a fear and respect we haven't seen in centuries. Astrid replied, as if it is the most obvious thing in the world. You think I'd abandon an opportunity to lead my family to glory? But this is all so much to take in. I need time to read the letter again and figure out where we go from here. And this amulet? What are you thinking? Serana asked. I'm thinking we need that amulet appraised. I want to know where it came from, how much it's worth, and if we can actually get away with selling it. And there's only one man who can give us what we need. Astrid paused a second before uttering the name Delvin Mallory. Delvin Mallory? He's a fence, a private operator. Works out of the Rat Way, in Rift 10. I'll keep the letter. Bring Mallory the amulet. Find out everything you can, and sell it if he's willing. He'll offer a letter of credit, that's fine. Delvin Mallory and the Dark Brotherhood have a long history. He can be trusted. Is he like a dealer of goods? Serana asked. He is. Why are you asking? Astrid asked back. Nothing. I'm just thinking about selling something away from the eyes of the public. Serana replied meekly. Just tell him it is something that has nothing to do with the Brotherhood. I don't want more favors to be placed on my tab. Astrid gave Serana a cold reply and went off to her quarters. Serana snorted as she wasn't pleased with the situation as a whole. After all, she was determined to follow her own path from now on. But some idea came across her mind. Maybe she can stay in the Dark Brotherhood for a few more days or so, since she had to travel towards Rift Inn either way. Rift Inn is where everything starts after all. Serana walked out from where she had a meeting with Astrid and headed into her quarters in the sanctuary. Usually, she has a small room dug for her, and it is where she keeps some of her items. She headed in and searched her belongings until she found a bottle of a certain brew. From the peculiar shape of the bottle, this is supposed to be a bottle of skooma. Serana opened the skooma bottle and smelled the unique scent of the moon sugar. Despite the smell being very familiar to her, Serana suddenly realized something was amiss. That's not my skooma, she mumbled. While she keeps the skooma in her quarters, the sanctuary has a golden rule, and that is no stealing from other Brotherhood members, or else there shall be retribution. Yet someone still dared to steal from her. But the skooma of all things? Half the sanctuary already snorts that shit in the open. They wouldn't just go after her bottle, her special bottle of special skooma. Serana immediately went and closed her quarters door before turning around and cursing. Astrid, she's suspicious of me being the listener and now goes through my stuff. Serana was angry, yet she didn't break her cool one bit. She understood her situation, and it is not like she keeps all her belongings in the sanctuary. She has a lot of stashes hidden in places even John Dare wouldn't find. Calmly, she walked towards one of the walls of her quarters and waved her hand at it as she cast some illusion spell on it. The spell caused the illusion that was already here to disappear immediately. While the wall looked ordinary, it was just a simple cover to hide a small alchemy table and some ingredients behind it. Deathbell, nightshade, moon sugar, and more. What's interesting is the product Serana seemed to be brewing is indeed skooma. Serana picked another bottle of skooma from her hidden stash and threw the one that was replaced away. This skooma she retrieved was the real deal compared to the watered-down crap she just found. This will change everything, Serana thought, and kept her original skooma bottle in her bag before carrying it and walking off the sanctuary of the Brotherhood. She also made it clear to some of the Brotherhood members that she is heading to Falkreath to confirm a few things before leaving. Once she headed off the sanctuary, however, she felt like she was being watched, and no matter how she tried to check her surroundings secretly, she failed to pick a trace of whoever is tracing her. Someone is a very skilled creep. She needed to immediately get out of the forest and find transportation to the next town. She was indeed fast on her feet and managed to slip away from her tail. watching her disappear with superior speed. The one who was sneaking behind appeared from the shadow of a tree. Oh, listener, dear listener, such a fate. Such a horrible, horrible fate. The stalker whined in agony as he rubbed his face on a bottle of skooma. He agonized over something going on in his mind. Astrid. Treacherous Astrid. Terrible and treacherous and cowardly Astrid. To think she is controlling the listener. The poor, poor listener with this tainted skooma. Arg. Treachery shall be punished. Yes, mother. Cicero shall punish them for you. And for the listener. A week later, Serana arrived at Rift Inn and went down the Ratway. The city was chaotic as ever since the emergence of the Dawn Guard, especially for being the closest city to their stronghold. Moreover, this city became filled with crosses and sticks where captured vampires are publicly executed day in and day out. In summary, it is the complete opposite of a place like Whiterun and Solitude, where the vampires almost attack daily. And for any vampire on any day of the week, it is insane to roam around the rift without some sort of backup or an escape route. One may think that Serana would be reckless and see herself inside the city without backup, which is no problem for her either way, but she was actually moving in a group with cloaked and hooded figures. During their silent sneak walk through the alleys of Rift Inn, they killed almost 5 Dawn Guard operatives, all to create a safe passage for Serana. The Ratway was the safest area in the city for vampires at the moment, and thus she stopped her escort and continued on her own through the sewers all the way to the Ragged Flagon. As she went in and attracted the attention of the thieves that were spread around the place, they all seemed to be wary and on their guard, and so she made her way in towards the sitting area. Hold it right there. At this moment, a brute approached her, raising his hand toward her shoulders. Instinctively, she held his hand, twisted his arm, kicked his feet off balance, and sent him heads first to the ground to make a dirge sound. The thieves seemed displeased with her actions, but as soon as they picked their knives, someone whistled. Leave that one be. Evacuate the place before she starts serving your blood in goblets. A voice spoke, and 2 women approached with crossbows aimed at her. Serana felt that these 2 women are extremely agile and accurate, so she didn't want to risk it at the moment for the sake of her goals. I came in peace, she said. Peace? The voice spoke again. For goddamn vampires to sneak down here, it means you'll lead all the Dawn Guard after you. So, why don't we kill you and take the prize for a vampire's head, lass? Because Serana turned her head and looked toward the direction where no one stood. Astrid said to treat you nicely. Let her pass, Brynjolf. Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded from inside the place as a man barely spoke before coughing. Just like that, a man appeared just beside Serana with a blade to her neck. He was totally invisible just a moment ago, but when he came out of invisibility, Serana seemed to be making eye contact with him before he even appeared. It gave Brynjolf some bad vibes as the vampire girl was clearly unfriendly, but still calm and collected. Delvin Mallory? Serana then looked away and asked in a hoarse voice. Come on in. Delvin spoke. Gonna make those kids uncomfortable just staring at them this way. Astrid didn't teach you any manners? Serana snorted lightly and walked into the tavern area where more people seemed to be aiming down their crossbows. The Dark Brotherhood requests your services. Serana spoke to Delvin. I see. Well now, how is Astrid doing these days? Tell her to stop by sometime. We can have a drink. Catch up. But we can discuss that later, yeah? What does the Brotherhood need? Delvin said as he offered Serana a seat. Serana sat down and looked around coldly before retrieving the amulet Amon Modier gave her and putting it in front of Delvin. He saw the amulet, and in an instant, the man went pale. What can you tell me about this? Serana asked. Motherfucker. He cursed lightly. What was that? Serana asked unamused. Nah, nothing. Ahem. Delvin cleared his throat and spoke. Just, where did you get this? Serana was about to reply that it is none of his business, but he suddenly raised his hands. Don't answer, I don't want to know, he said and continued. This is an amulet of the Emperor's Elder Council, specially crafted for each member. Worth a small fortune. Ain't something you'd give up lightly. Look, it ain't my business to tell the Dark Brotherhood its business. But if you killed a member of the Elder Council, you'd better belly. Will you buy it, or should I just leave? Serana impatiently said. Buy it? This? An Elder Council amulet? Oh yes. Oh yes, indeed. Wait just one moment here. It's a letter of credit. Usable, by Astrid only, for any service or item I can provide. As per our standard arrangement. You bring that back to your lovely mistress. With my regards. Serana looked at the letter and felt heavy in her heart that it wasn't a coin, but her business was now done. One more thing, Serana said before taking an item from her bag. It was the skooma bottle she had on her. That is, Delvin asked. It is a personal question, but does your people know where I can market that? She asked. Delvin looked at the table and smiled. Going independent, little vampire? He asked. No, just experimenting on things. It's a new mix, Serana said. Delvin hesitated before taking the bottle, opening its cork, and smelling its content. Whoa, he suddenly felt a strong kick just from a small sniff. Cough. Cough. What did you put in that? Secrets, she replied. That's cough. It's better than anything in the market. Did you force an alchemist to brew it for you? He asked as he closed the skooma bottle. Secrets, she replied again. Fine, keep your secrets, Delvin said and returned the bottle to Serana. Just a friendly gesture if you want to sell that stuff. You can find a Dunmare by the name Sardis Idrin. He's in the fishery if you look carefully. Much obliged. Serana took back her bottle and immediately turned around leaving. That's amusing. Delvin watched Serana leave and waited until she walked out from the ragged flagon before immediately turning to Brynjolf. That sly John Dare. He cursed. He knew he would come across this and put a price for it in the market just yesterday. What do you want to do? Brynjolf asked. Contact the rascal. Tell him to drop by and visit OL Delvin. His Imperial Council amulet has arrived. Delvin said and laughed shortly. Imperial Counselor of Skyrim, John fucking Dare. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr. e/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 622, The Man Who Cried Vampire. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr. e/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. It was upsetting not to receive any money from Delvin, but it seemed that Astrid is way too careful when it comes to handling her cash. This letter of credit serves no value anywhere outside the Thieves' Guild, and Serana had no use of it. Still, she kept the letter of credit and headed towards the docks of Riften. What are you looking for, beauty? Asked one of the men who seemed to be working in the dock as she strolled by the pier. The stink of the fish reeked through the man's motions, but as he got closer to harass the well-dressed lady, he smelled some stench that was a lot stronger than his, and it was coming from that lady's mouth as she spoke. Sardis Idrin, Serana replied. I'm looking for a Dunmare that is called Sardis Idrin. While it is not weird for people to look for Sardis Idrin, considering his profession as a drug dealer, the fisherman seemed threatened by the mere presence of Serana now that he got closer. He looked around, but it was too late already. His mates have already gone ahead to the Bee and Barbin, and he was just going to tie up some literal loose ends so the boats don't dangle with the current at night and get damaged. I think he is that way. The Nord fisherman pointed with shaky fingers and managed to hastily take one step back from Serana as she looked where he pointed. He realized that something is wrong with that woman wandering the dock at night and smiling towards him this way. She was calm, too damn calm as a slaughterfish waiting to jump off the water and wreak havoc. He really wanted to get away. Be a dear and guide me there. As the man was certain he slipped away, the woman's voice came from the direction he wasn't looking when he was slipping away, causing him to instinctively back off with terrified expressions. It's over there. He pointed out with a shaky hand. Lead the way, please. I'm begging you. Do it. The man went down on his knees to beg for mercy, but each time the woman spoke, the suffocating scent of blood coming from her mouth terrified the living ghost out of him. He was a man that thought it would be fun to hit on a woman wandering the docks alone at night. But right now, he was begging for his life in front of a vampire. He knew it was a vampire just by the hunger in her eyes and the bloody feeling she gave. He knew that Rift Inn is the home of the Dawn Guard, and despite the crime rate and the infamous Ratway, this city was clean from the inside out from vampires. He only needs to run past that woman and he'll stumble into a Dawn Guard patrol in any street. He just had to. Flick, flick. Serana flicked her fingers in front of the man's face and brought him to his senses. "You okay, mister?" she called. "Where is that Sarthis Idran fellow? I really don't want to have my dinner late." Wah. I said as he is over this way. The fisherman found no way for himself to outrun the vampire woman, and her eyes were gleaming with a dangerous light as she demanded him to lead the way. The situation where he found himself never avoiding. This way, he said, took a step back, turned to the side, and started walking, paying his full attention towards Serana rather than the pier he's walking on. As they went down from the higher pier to the lower pier, the light became darker and the air around the woman became much colder and colder as she kept staring at the man in a bad hunger. The moment he approached a torch hanging on a wall, he immediately pulled it and walked away from her at a faster pace. "What was that?" she asked. Looking back, she was there no more, but rather, she was locking her arms in front of him. "Die, you monster," was what he wanted to say inside his head. Just for lighting, but rather than shouting and waving the torch, he just extended his hand and offered it to her. "I have good eyes, no thanks," she said before asking impatiently, "Are we there yet?" "Yes, it is that door over there," he said and pointed, gasping shortly between every word as his mental state was consumed by fear. "Oh, you're a lifesaver." She showed a faint smile as she said so. "Can I go now?" The fisherman asked as his fear was taking over his mind, but Serana's reply made his heart almost burst from terror. "Of course not," she replied. "No good deed goes unrewarded." Her hand moved swiftly, and as the man accepted the fate of getting his body torn and his blood spilled, yet what met his eyes was the reflection of moonlight over a shiny object. "I only have silver on me," she said. "Go buy yourself something nice." The man received the silver, sipped him silently, and felt like he was staring into the void. With shaky hands, the man put the coin in his pocket and turned around to walk away. Suddenly, "Have a nice life." Those words immediately triggered the man, and he bolted away into a full-powered sprint. "Sigh," Serana sighed. "That wasn't necessary, hurt. My lady." A voice similar to Serana's replied as a woman walked out of the shadows, as she seemed not to be able to contain her smile. "Where is Hearn?" Serana asked. "I am here, my lady." This time, a man of a close resemblance to the woman appeared. Both of them were vampires, and they seemed more powerful than any common ones, too. Hearn and Hurt bowed to Serana as she stared at them. "Stop causing trouble. This is the first phase of our plans, so make sure to do everything as planned. I didn't save your lives, so you keep playing around." Serana said patiently. "We hear you, my lady." Hurt knelt instead of bowing and poked her husband Hearn to kneel as well. Seeing the two vampires being submissive to her, Serana was filled with pride and confidence. "Everyone else, you're all in possession?" she asked. "Yes, I am. Ready." 10 confirmations were heard aside from Hearn and Hurt, who were standing in front of Serana. As Serana's eyes gleamed brightly in the darkness, 12 pairs of eyes around her gleamed with the same hunger she did as they went knocking on the door of the unfortunate drug lord. "A vampire! It's a vampire! Help! Folks! People! A vampire!" The fisherman went into the bee and Barb running with half his weight lost from the horror he was in. "A vampire? Are you sure?" Talon-Gei, the inn assistant, was the first to respond since Rift Inn was one of the safest places thanks to the Dawn Guard. "A vampire. A woman. She vampire. She's at the docks. Her mouth it reeks with blood." The fisherman cried. "By the gods!" One exclaimed. "What did she do to you? How did you escape? Did she injure you?" Another asked. "No, she didn't touch me. I swear to Mara." The fisherman freaked out, knowing that what they meant by saying is referring to the vampiric infection. But he then remembered something. She gave me that coin. The fisherman took the silver coin off his pocket and threw it on a table. Don't put that in front of me. The woman who was sitting at the table tried to throw away the coin, but as she was doing so, she paused and looked at it, saying, "Isn't that a silver septim?" Then descended into silence as everyone looked between the coin and the freaking out fisherman. "It is a silver coin indeed," said a man who was sitting opposite that woman. The tense atmosphere started to grow little by little as people seemed to be calming down gradually. "What's wrong? What's with silver?" asked the fisherman. "It is pure metal, you goddamn moron. Pure things like silver make the vampires burn," said the man. But she was holding it casually. "That can't be right." The fisherman cried as he tried to justify what he witnessed. "You moron, you're scaring my customers." Kirava the innkeeper shouted as brought her broom to chase away the fisherman. The priest said the other day that unholy beings like vampires can't appear on a silver-plated mirror because it is a pure metal. Fishermen should be the next thing they burn after vampires. Get out of here. Get back to that dirty bunkhouse. As the Argonian innkeeper kicked him away, the Nord fisherman was at a loss for words, as he was more sure than anything in the world that what he witnessed was nothing natural. It is like death incarnate, and he wasn't supposed to make it out alive. He had to escape. He had to run, live, and be as far away from here as possible. Seeing the little man run, a pair of multicolored eyes watched the situation, then got narrowed before a shadow sprinted through the roofs of Rift Inn and headed towards the dockyard. "Vampires. Please. No. Have Mayor crack." The last thing Sarthis Idrin, the drug lord of Rift Inn, felt was every bone in his neck shatter. 13 vampires walked slowly and very carefully made sure that whoever's dead stays that way. Attacks from their fangs can carelessly turn any of the dying here into a vampire if they survived, so heads had to be rolled in order to make it look like a drug war massacre or something, which ironically is the case. Serana extracted all the information she wanted from the Dunmere drug lord and left him for her 3 hounds to rip to shreds. "Deacus, make sure that you remove any bite marks and throw some of the bodies in the lake," she said as she ordered her first hound. "Yes," the Argonian vampire, Deacus, replied. "Enodius, help Deacus chop off the bodies," she ordered again. "My lady," the imperial vampire bowed his head and took out an axe. "Lurbak, you're on bone-breaking duty," she finally added. The orc vampire groaned as he was unable to speak due to the metal dog gag Serana put on his jaw, since she quite hated his voice. "You caused a big mess, young girl." A 4 vampire appeared to Serana and spoke down to her rather than being as submissive as the rest. "And Ugnies, I hate spilling blood, but for pests like them, I am really less and less remorseful," Serana replied. "I don't care what you do. I just want to get back to my house already. This is the farthest I have been from my home in 20 years. The elderly Nord vampire, who is called Ugnies, seemed to be complaining about everything. We just wanted to do one last thing on the way back," Serana replied and started walking out of the warehouse, followed by her underlings. Those 12 vampires are no stranger to anyone who ever played the game, and if John was to see this scene, he would be shocked at what Serana managed to accomplish. Those 12 vampires are all the kill targets that Serana was sent on by the Dark Brotherhood during the past few months. Each of them is simply an assassination target, which she converted into vampires except for Hearn and Hurt, who already are. She gathered herself a team of dangerous individuals that she made all by herself, and she bestowed upon them the gift of the night. Their purposes were all conflicted, but her goal was enforced upon them by the power of her blood, since she is a strong and ancient vampire. All she needed to do was to give them a choice: die to the blade of an assassin, or become a vampire and look after whoever wanted them dead. It was a fair trade that all 12 of them accepted, except for old Ugnies, who seemed rather unaware of the concept of death. Still, Serana had founded herself a small family, and she was ready to outplay both John Dare and her father. Her next goal is the Redwater Denver. Not so fast, Miss Vampy. Those are so many corpses you're leaving behind, don't you think? Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 623, Sweet But Psycho. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. The Pier of Riften is always dangerous, especially during nighttime. If not an Argonian skooma-driven thug jumping off the water to strip you of your belongings, it would either be cutthroats or worse nightmares. But never a vampire. Yet this scene didn't start with a vampire wreaking havoc. It starts with a pair of eyes that reflect the scenes of the bloodshed left in the wake of those bloodsuckers. A dreadful scene was for all the freaks of the Rift to back off the docks, just by the stench overflowing through the air. All but one. "Who are you?" asked a voice as it just came almost from everywhere. The voice caused the vampires to be on alert as they thought they heard it, but it was too faint to be directed to them. "Yes, you. I'm talking to you," the voice said again, drawing closer, but almost from everywhere. "Who's there?" asked Betild, the Nord vampire who held a large battle axe. Including her, there were only 4 vampires standing guard at the pier, as the rest of the vampires seemed to be doing their business elsewhere. These 4 seemed to have suddenly become restless when an individual they couldn't recognize showed itself in a place where sight can't reach. "Enodius Lurbuck," Betild called as she commanded another 2 vampires who were an Imperial and an Orc, "Look around." The situation seemed suddenly becoming stranger as the voice started to emerge once again. "It seems that the 4 of you still want to play. Fine. What game do you prefer? Hide and seek?" The voice spoke once again, much closer this time, and made childish laughs. It said a dangerous detail that there were 4 of them, referring to the 4th vampire that was hiding underwater. Betild wanted to call out Serana immediately, since the opponent seemed someone beyond their ability, but the moment she turned around, she couldn't find the entrance to the building she was guarding. "What the?" Betild's throat became dry, but in the next second, the air started to become foggy, and Lake Henrik was not visible as it was just a few seconds ago. The fog started to become heavier, and the vertical scale of view was getting reduced faster and faster. "Illusions. Filthy magic." Betild roared as she waved her axe with vigor, but the fog only got heavier and all the sounds in the world started to die down. As a newly transformed vampire, Betild's power should be wild and explosive, but all that uncontrollable power made her feel like she was swimming in heavy water and barely able to move a limb. That feeling. It is exactly the same thing she feels under the gaze of Serana. Whenever her lady is displeased, things tend to feel like this. But somehow, this feeling was caused by a different person, and unlike Serana, that person seemed to be hostile. "Enodius Lurbuck, Dekus," Betild called the 3, but as she took a few steps around where she stood, she stumbled upon one of them lying on the ground. It was the Argonian Dekus, and he was knocked out with his tongue dangling, as if he was punched with tremendous power. What followed this discovery with 2 thuds, as the other 2 hound were knocked out the same way. Shit. Betild knew that she was completely outmatched with no chance to retort, and at that moment, a fist flew towards her face. As the fist drew closer, Betild's flow started to change its direction as she suddenly started to take distance from the coming fist, but she wasn't the one doing the evasion. Rather, she was pulled back by someone, and the sound of a swoosh passed by her ears, and she could hear a loud metallic sound not too far. The situation stayed quiet for a second before the fog started to go away. The scene was just as it was before the intrusion of the owner of that voice. What changed was that an arrow was resting deep into a fire brazier that used to illuminate some part of the pier, but now its content was all spilled into the water. "Show yourself." Serana finally spoke. She was of course the one who had rescued Betild just a second ago. I am right here, Miss Vampire. Yet the reply she wasn't really anticipating came so cheekily and casually. Another swoosh was heard, and an arrow rushed towards the origin of that voice. The owner of such a nice voice is clearly a woman who revealed herself not too far from where Serana was. She was wearing a cloak, as any suspicious person would, and her face was half hidden under a hood. The arrow that flew towards her hit its target splendidly just in the middle of her chest through the opening of the cloak. This clearly spoke for the exquisite skill of the archer, but that was far from the end of the story. The arrow may have found its target, but whether it landed or not is up to debate, since the arrow was completely swallowed under the cloak and disappeared. Serana frowned as she couldn't anticipate that at all, neither sensed any hint of magic. Something is greatly amiss. Splendid shot, the suspicious woman praised. It is only proper for me to return it, I may say. What was seen next was the arrow that was fired against the woman flying back from her, towards its origin. She didn't even move a limb or show a hint of movement. But the arrow flew out at an extreme precision. It couldn't just be done with magic. Hold! Serana tried to fire a fast spell at the arrow, but it broke free from her command and found its target, an archer hiding on the roof of the warehouse. The archer was hit and knocked off the roof into the lake. Get her! Serana couldn't withstand the anger of seeing 5 of her subordinates being toyed with. From the warehouse's entrance behind her, 6 shadows sprung forth with a strong aura way beyond the 4 that were taken down. Those 7 rushed from all directions at the suspicious woman. Now you're taking me seriously? The woman showed a smile, then her aura exploded in a rapid and wild form. The tranquil and quiet domineer she put on all that time was simply exploding with insanity and craziness as her cloak exploded into fabrics and her appearance was exposed. Jellinar, golden eye, violet eye, sweet smile, exactly as her half-violet, half-golden aura look. The evolution of John's aura of madness, the crazy wild aura that she perfected. A sweet but truly psycho. Once the vampires got to her, they were akin to moths to a flame. She punched the first so hard that his neck was almost torn but remained severely broken. The second was stomped on her face and pushed back so hard that her back snapped. The third was occasionate, and he was met with her knee on his face, completely crushing all his features. The fourth was attempting to stay at some distance and cast a spell, but Jellinar was right in front of him, digging her index and middle fingers into his eye sockets. The fifth and the sixth were a pair of Nord and Redguard warriors holding great weapons, but they were suddenly twisting the wrong way and injuring each other just as they got behind Jellinar and attempted to hit her. The reason was obviously the hidden confusion effect of her aura. 6 strong vampires, 6 piles of sorry failures, up to a total of 11 vampires defeated by Jellinar alone in the span of 10 seconds. Miss Vampire, you still took me too light. Jellinar was about to turn towards Serana, but the latter was already at a point-blank range from her, trying to grapple Jellinar by her neck. Shoot! Jellinar was surely surprised as Serana spread out 2 wings and completely transformed into her vampire lord form. No matter how it looked, Serana completely pushed Jellinar out of the pier all the way through Lake Henrik and flew half a mile at an unstoppable speed, trying to crush Jellinar on every tree and boulder in the way. From where they stood, an elderly Nord vampire woman stood watching this scene as she walked last from the warehouse and watched the destruction laid to the place. Goddamn morons. Someone has to clean up this mess, you know. All you fighting types are eager to kill each other. Oblivion takes you all. The woman kept cursing as she took out a staff from her cloak and kept gathering around the injured vampires by magic before putting them together in a line and then activating a portal. I'll finally be going home anyway. Works for old me. She said so and shoved all the vampires through the portal before following them through. In a place far away, Jellinar stood over Serana and held up a large tree trunk. Stake to the heart. 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 Each time she says that, She would smite Serana down with the tree trunk to the point where she formed a pit with all the bounding. Serana wasn't particularly damaged from that, but with the tremendous power which Jelinek exerted, it was almost unbelievable that she was fighting a mortal. It is as if she was fighting. "Oh, hey, John." And all of a sudden, Jelinek stopped bounding the trunk against Serana and threw it away as she put 2 fingers against her right temple and pointed the left one up, saying, "Hold on a second," for Serana. "Ah, yes, yes, just hunting some vampires for your Dawnguard friends. Yes, this is the 134th. Go back." "But why?" Fine. Will this be enough of a lesson? I'll keep an eye on the solitude situation. Whatever you say, love you, bye." Jelinek was done with John's telepathic call and turned to Serana. "Sorry to keep you waiting. My husband needs me somewhere else. Bye." Serana was already frozen the moment she heard the name of John, but linking all the dots together, she felt like that everything around her was simply suffocating. A woman this powerful, John's call, Dawnguard friends, teaching a lesson in the solitude situation. Was John sending her a message just now? Was he watching? Has he known everything all along? He wasn't actually letting her go. She was too naive to think that for a second she became free. She was impatient and acted too fast. She watched Jelinek dust off her clothes and was about to walk away, so she stood up as well. "Hey, you, wait." Serana stood up and gazed hatefully at Jelinek. Tell him I do things my own way, and he must count me out of his crazy plans, but I'll honor the last deal, and that's it." Serana spoke those words with anger and activated a magic ring on her finger. A portal opened beneath her feet, and she suddenly fell into it, leaving Jelinek frowning at her. What in Shio's name? She crazy or something? Jelinek never really knew who Serana is, but Psycho just pushed John's plans back to their right tracks. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 624, The Game is Afoot. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. "So what do you say about this, young miss?" Safia said. "We have been bested by a stronger foe." "I don't hold any of you," Serana said as she held the shaft of the axe stuck into Safia's head and pulled it out, responsible. The vampires which she had were battered by a single opponent that could only be described as an imitation of the monster John Dare is. It was already too much for her to manage her own ground against her father's horde and against John's power. She simply wanted to do things her own way, but the fact that she couldn't get it all done was just depressing. The 2 years she spent alone in her father's castle made her think twice of her plans. She was sure that escaping is the only way she can be independent, but she needed John in every stage so far. She didn't feel any negative feelings toward John except for a hint of jealousy. He was simply as overwhelming as her father and twice as cunning. Serana had one thing that traumatized her past, and that was the process of becoming a daughter of Cold Harbor. She was offered with her mother to none other than Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of all things hateful. She was used by him in his monstrous form until she was literally killed and resurrected again as an original vampire. The same happened with his mother, and the two of them eventually turned her father into a vampire lord who gained a lot of power and favor from Molag Bal. He even became the prince's most loyal subject as the one who sacrificed both his wife and daughter to the Lord. In a way, Serana understood from that experience that she deserved that power, and now she owns it. A power that is hers for hundreds of years. But when she met someone like John, whose power is akin to a force of nature, her concept of power flipped upside down. She lost confidence and believed that everything she ever believed was a lie. She knows that John Dare is a Dragonborn. She just can't accept that he holds all that power and accepts his own mortality and never fears her father, who is in a literal sense a doom to his enemies. Such was the confidence she needed to follow John's example and stand up bravely against her father. In the end, she gritted her teeth, knowing how lost she feels from inside, and that her efforts are simply too far-fetched as she chased in John's shadow to stand up against her father. It put on a terrible and bitter weight on her heart. If John had gained his power from being a wanderer, she would have become one. If he gained it by being a soldier, she would have become one. If he gained it through being a dragon hunter, she would have become one too without fear. But he had this power before hunting any dragon. He had it before any war started. He had it before being an adventurer. When she thought about it, what John has since his start and what she never had. A family. Serana's family screwed her up, and John's family made him into a fearsome lord. And she was right. Of all the people who would know John's true power, she's the first one to expose his secret. But family is her weakness. So she had to create her own family. A band of misfits she gifted with vampirism. The one she was ought to kill as a Dark Brotherhood assassin. Hearn and Hurt, two Nord vampires who lived as lumberjacks on a traveling road where they picked their victims from the lonely travelers. Beatild, a Nord woman hated by most when she was a mining forewoman in Dawnstar. Enodius, an unfortunate Imperial who was kicked from his job in a wood mill and was ordered dead by the same person that got him kicked. Lurbuck, an orc who thought himself a bard only to be ordered dead by the entirety of Mordhau, and then to be gagged by the other vampires to stop him from singing. Deacus, an Argonian who hunts for shiny things and was ordered dead by some unfortunate grudge. Mirandra Joe, a Casiat who was part of the caravans but got betrayed by a member of his caravan to push him out of the chain of command. Anariath, a boomer hunter from Whiterun who was ordered dead over some age-old grudge. Maluril, a Dunmare wizard who dabbled with Dwemer magic but got subdued by Serana when she bested him in magic and offered him true power in vampirism to eventually become her disciple. Helvard, a Nord housecarl from Falkreath. Serana had to kill him in public, but she actually poisoned him and faked his death before dragging him to make him into a vampire. Safia, a Redguard pirate leader who was suppressed by Serana before she made her into a vampire. And lastly, the most mysterious of them all, Ugnis, an elderly Nord whose background is mysterious but somehow hates leaving the place she's assigned to. Serana had to find a way in order to kill this woman in a fort filled with Imperial soldiers, but she was so nonchalant about meeting an assassin, let alone a vampire, and she didn't even want to listen to Serana, who threatened her with everything she has. Later, she agreed to look after Serana while she stayed in her fort with the other vampires. This band of misfits was all that Serana had, but deep down in her heart, she knew very well that they were simply a band of strangers put together by force. Their stay in this fortress is also temporary, and they will eventually have to vacate to the location she is after. My lady, if you let us take some thralls, we wouldn't have to fall into the trap of those vampire hunters and act more covertly. One of the vampires spoke. It is no good this time, Hurt, Serana replied. If our trace is exposed, we will gain too much attention. This time, the enemy was just giving us a warning. I guess you all understand how much danger we are up against after what happened tonight. Serana's words fell heavy on her vampires, and they all shivered from the sheer power of the foe they met today. So, how do we adjust our plans to this? Safia asked. We won't, Serana replied. I will have to go back and do something on my own. Meanwhile, you can act freely and try to eliminate as many Skooma suppliers as possible. If you can do so, this will increase the demand on the Redwater Denver. Then we strike the den and take over everything. The vampires over there are powerful, but they don't understand the value of what they have. Leave it all to me, and I'll get rid of them easily. We just need to watch and wait. Serana stood up and took out a small vial with a crystallized drop of blood in it. We will make something revolutionary. The Dark Brotherhood was calm for the past week, and occasionally one of the members would go out and shovel off the snow from the Black Door, yet they were all just waiting for the listener. Astrid was acting way too calm and quiet, as if she wouldn't let anyone disturb her peace, but the senior members of the Brotherhood are all well aware of her personality, and they didn't believe the calm facade. On the other hand, the merry jester Cicero was awfully quiet just like Astrid, and barely mumbled in front of people. If this quiet was to last for more, then all the assassins would foresee the storm that is about to come. But at the end of the week, Serana arrived and immediately met with Astrid. The conversation they had was held behind closed doors in Astrid's chambers. "Good that you're back. What did Mallory have to say? Is the amulet authentic?" asked Astrid as she asked Serana to sit in front of her. "Yes," replied Serana. "It is an amulet specially made for what is called the Elder Council members." "The Elder Council. Color me impressed. That explains quite a bit indeed," Astrid said, scratched her chin, and started laughing. "Modier, you naughty, naughty boy. Hiring the Dark Brotherhood to help you rise beyond your station. Delicious," Astrid mumbled before turning to Serana and asking, "Was Mallory willing to buy the amulet?" "More than willing. He was the happiest a man can ever be." Serana replied, "Here's a letter of credit." "Splendid. Then we're ready to begin." Astrid kept the letter of credit in her bra before looking at Serana with a cheeky face, or, more specifically, "You're the one ready to begin. After all, you're the one the night Mother spoke to." "Do I really have to?" Serana asked with reluctance. "If you want to be the greatest assassin that ever lived, then yes, you do," Astrid said. "Now then, I hope you have something nice to wear, because you're going to a wedding." Serana frowned. "The wedding, the one in Solitude?" Serana asked. "Oh, so you're keeping up with the Vicis. How nice of you to save me the time to explain." Astrid spoke in her villainous voice, showing a hint of mockery. "It should be a lovely affair. You'll mingle with the guests, eat some cake, stab the bride." "Truly," Serana acted surprised. "Oh yes, you got to kill the bride. At her wedding. And they say romance is dead." Astrid laughed. Serana had to take a moment to think, since this is going to be Solitude, the city where John Dare is mostly directing his attention towards. "The wedding, huh? That's going to be troublesome. Your target's name is Vittoria Vici. She oversees the East Empire Company's business holdings in Solitude. The wedding is being held in that city, at the Temple of the Divines. Her death will cause an uproar, which is exactly what we want. Vici is likely to address her guests frequently, as is the wedding custom. Kill her when she does that. Now go and deliver my best to the bride." Astrid said. Serana didn't want to hear more about the kill order, since she knew that this situation would drag away from her personal plan. But suddenly, things started to connect in her mind, and she started to see a profit for her own situation within this one. Skyrim being in chaos will surely benefit her very much, since even the vampires must avoid large-scale human armies. It is known that the wedding in Solitude may be the first consolation to the peace process between the Stormcloaks and the Empire, which is bad for business either way. As long as the humans keep fighting, Serana will have a lot of time to prepare amidst the chaos, and just like John, she will enrich and grow her family until she is ready to face anyone who may pose danger to her plans. She'll have to continue playing meek by now. And so, Serana went into the main hall of the Dark Brotherhood in order to fix the plan with the other assassins and prepare for the assassination of Vittoria Vici. While that is happening, the same process is happening in various places in the world. The assassination in Solitude was a big thing that John managed to leak to the Penitus Oculatus, the imperial authority of Skyrim, the East Empire Company, and the Court of Solitude. Even the agents of the Dare Corps were stationed in Solitude a week before that. All of this was for the grand day of the wedding, the day of the assassination. A day that even John had to sharpen a special blade, just for. After all, the game is afoot. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL, https://linktr/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 625, The Bloody Wedding 1. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL, https://linktr/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. As one of John Dare's lovers, the Emperor's cousin, the overseer of the East Empire Company's holding in Skyrim, and the only daughter of Count Vici, things didn't go as easy as everyone expected when it comes to Vittoria Vici. Aside from how she became the center of Solitude's talk the past month aside from the Dragonborn, who can bounce in and out from the sky, things were taking a drastic direction to no way back. First and foremost, the cat was already out of the box a long time ago, with Vittoria's relationship with John Dare being a rumor that circulated around her back whenever the people from the high society of the Empire in Skyrim spoke about her. She was so close to the people of Winterhold that it ruined many other businesses, most notably Thane Eriker and his associates. But it didn't end here, as whenever the Dare Dragon Company would take any step, Vittoria Vici would mobilize the entire East Empire Company to help them out. Ultimately, the Dare Dragon Company gained a contract to import ebony or from House Reduran of Morrowind and open up a trade route that the East Empire Company has failed to open for almost 200 years. An achievement that was recorded on Vittoria's page to make her the rising star of the business in the Empire along with the tycoon, John Dare. This image the two conveyed in the business world would rarely emerge without a great deal of trust between the two partners, and with John's reputation as a Casanova, it was like 1 + 1 to most people that John and Vittoria are both in bed together, both literally and figuratively. John is, by all means, tough competition and someone who plays unfairly with an amount of money that is as vast as the Emperor's coffers, and so most of the judgmental comments were circulating around Vittoria herself. Still, Vittoria's reputation isn't that clean either, since her parties were always known to be sinful and lustful with a heavy presence of Dibella's cult in them. From her mother to her associates, Vittoria was clearly being considered John's little toy. Maven Blackbriar and Volwolf Snowshod didn't like John Dare one bit thanks to these rumors. Maven was the one who had a legendary animosity with John Dare, and she was also the one who wanted to be associated with the East Empire Company and Vittoria Vici by arranging her marriage to Asgir Snowshod, Maven's business partner. Meanwhile, Volwolf Snowshod was spiteful against John Dare, since the latter is involved in a nasty and unbelievable rumor as far as Maven described it. However, John Dare has done the Snowshod clan a favor they would never forget, and that's why they didn't take any step against him. John Dare has saved the life of Lelija Snowshod, the daughter of the Snowshod clan. John was said to have been passing with his men near Whiterun, where the Empire and the Stormcloak fought, and as the battle heated and the civilians of the nearby villages were endangered, John shouted the two armies with his voice and stopped the fight. There he saved a Stormcloak shield maiden's life, and that happened to be Lelija Snowshod, who conveyed the news to her family that it was John Dare who saved her from a near death. A situation of love, hate, betrayal, money, and bad blood was involved in the most intertwined and complicated way ever, but John would always throw more chaos into the fray, as if he was waiting for some explosion to unfold. But tomorrow was the wedding, and everyone was ready to get it done. The number of guests and gifts that arrived at Solitude was innumerable, and the fat ship of the Dare Dragon Company was blocking the dock by its sheer size and cargo. John Dare was present on the ship in person, and in a rare sight that many merchants were said to have flooded the docks in order to meet him. He also graciously met them all and held a massive banquet that was said to have meats and spices from places as far as Elsewhere and as exotic as the Dragon Isles and the Akaviri Sea. The music which filled the air in the area occupied by John's company was just one of many areas that held such exquisite celebration, and the entire city of Solitude was in what could be described as a grand carnival mood. It was so festive and loud that the economy of Hafingar region was booming to an unimaginable degree. After all, Vittoria Vici herself has overloaded the warehouses with so many goods to be ready for the amount of gold that is about to be gained in the wake of this wedding. That, of course, is a plan which she had running in a course of its own and independently by herself. Even John was just a participant in this grand sale. Skyrim's mead and wine have overflowed from all the halls and meaderies to gather in Solitude this evening. Hooray to all the generous hosts of this marvelous night. This wedding will be held for 1 week straight, as the old traditions state. Skyrim will be tipsy just from the mead we shall raise to her honor. Fill the horns and call the honorable shield thanes. We shall duel and eat and drink till we make those in Sovngarde jealous. In his lofty seat on his private ship party, John listened to the Skalds sing and boast about his fame and honor, so he would reward them with septims and hear their requests. It is a lordly practice that he would do whenever there is any public celebration. He was also watching Solitude clearly as he sent many magical familiars to fly over the city and watch all the people of interest. Sometimes his familiars would run into other magical familiars that belonged to other mages who were clearly trying to keep the advantage of the eye from the sky to their respective factions, and thanks to his keen senses, he could sense the links of those familiars and determine their sources in the city. If those familiar belonged to anyone he is not fond of, such as the Thalmor for example, he would direct his familiars and tear through theirs with his brutish amount of magicka. But as the first night was almost over, John excused himself from his own party to rest a bit, but he seemed to have disappeared completely and left John Battleborn in his stead as host. Where John went was clearly someplace where he can have more enjoyment for the remainder of the night. A man and a woman energetically moved against each other in a passionate entanglement, sweating and moaning together. The night was theirs in these stony chambers in solitude, and they intended to make the most of this situation. As the man laid on his back, the woman came on top and took a cowgirl position as she used her hips to hop up and down. Depending on the man, a woman would need to use more power in her hips, and depending on the woman, a man would harden his rump and use his legs to intensify the output. Also, whether the woman leans forward to get closer or leans back for more control, the man will always be focused on her breasts, whether it is by his hands or his mouth. It is a great pleasure either way for both the man and the woman, but it lasts as long as the two have the stamina for it. Some people would have a lot, some wouldn't. The most important thing is how they feel after it. Some couples love to control and feel a great pleasure seeing their partner exhausted and begging for breath, even if they are much younger, just to prove to themselves that they still got it. Some would tend to maximize the pleasure of their partner so that they forget about the world and reach the ultimate pleasure to feel satisfied with how excellent they are. Some would completely give up and put their trust in their partners knowing that they are in safe hands. Some would just be selfish and abandon their partner after they reach their climax first. It is all about the chemistry between the partners in the end. Sex, after all, is a means to an end and a game of control, just like anything in life. Maven Blackbriar had to step off her lover's tired body and retreat to the beds, and quickly, in order to reach her climax on her own before the feeling of pleasure goes away. She used her fingers fiercely, and her inside exploded as she let out a strong load, charged with all her vigor, and it finally left her breathless and relaxed. Seeing her partner, Esgir Snowshod, lying on his back with his man part twitching as he lost all his breath from having this fierce sex with her, Maven felt proud as she drew closer to him and clutched his neck in an act of control. But just as he started to feel suffocated, she let go of his neck and held Beard as she pulled his face to face her by it. "Go and get dressed," she said. "Tomorrow is your big day, groom." "Al, all right," he replied, and went off to put on his robes. While Maven watched her toy boy buttocks while he's wearing his clothes, she had a sense of pride running through her, but as he was done, he stretched his hand to pick up a flask from the nearby table. "Don't," she shouted. Esgir immediately tensed from Maven's scary stare, but she quickly fixed the way she looked at him. "It's all right," she said as stood up and put on her robe. The way she walked to him was completely intoxicating as she loosened her dress entirely for a naked line to be exposed up from her neck down to her firm inner boobs, hardened abs, light bush, and all the way with her long legs. Her sway as she walked was strong, and the look on her face was strong as ever, which would always control him. No skooma before the wedding. She picked the bottle from his hand and returned it to the table, and then opened a drawer and retrieved a green flask. "That, you need stamina for tomorrow. Go and sleep now, and drink this after you wake up," she said as she handed him the flask. "Yes." Esgir lowered his head and put the flask in his pocket. Maven even brought him a cloak, and Hood then put it on him and ensured that the groom isn't spotted screwing around the night before his wedding. She also fixed her dress and showed him to the door. Controlling a boy in the age of her children was the easiest thing Maven could do. Add to the fact that this 20-year-old boy is the heir to the Snowshod clan that has deep pockets and funds half of her operation under his name. She wouldn't let a single woman wrap her legs around him who is her toy. The matter of Vittoria's wedding was bound to happen only when Asgir is completely tamed by Maven and moves by her commands. Maven didn't want to wed any of her children to a stronger family that she wouldn't be able to control directly, and that's where Asgir came to play. She indeed saw him out of her chambers on the second floor of the Winking Skeever Inn and watched as the boy walked away. She has finally managed to build back his confidence, which was shattered by John Dare's and Vittoria Vici's affair. She wouldn't have resorted to such measures, such as sleeping with a groom the night before his wedding, if not for such a problem. But Maven's night was far from over. Just as Asgir walked down the stairway and disappeared, the door opposite to her in room opened and a red-haired giant emerged. He looked around and was instantly surprised when he saw her, before looking at the crowd below at the inn and spotting Asgir Snowshaw below. John smiled as he realized which noisy neighbors he had for the night, then cleared the way for a hooded woman to pass from behind him. The woman hugged him on her way out, but as she noticed Maven, she pulled her on her face and bolted out of the inn. While Maven didn't see her face, it was easy to distinguish the imperial features and realize that this was Vittoria Vici, the bride. John had a long stare against Maven, which ended with him walking out of the room and sitting at a table outside in the lobby that the rooms opened to. I noticed that there was someone I couldn't get rid of when I rented the entire floor. Maven said, "Such a shame." John bit on the cork of a wine bottle and spat it away. "We could have had a nice orgy if I knew it was you." "Such a brat," Maven replied. "Despite all, you will still cling to a married woman in order to let your business float. You would need a lesson or two in shame." Maven walked ahead, and John pointed with his hand for her as an invitation to sit down. And for the first time since this novel began, John Dare sat face to face with Maven Blackbriar for an all-out war of insults. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 626, The Bloody Wedding 2. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. He is a monster. She is a poisonous snake. They both see eye to eye in terms of who they are. 14 years was it? It was. And here you are, the rat who walked out of Rift 10. I'm a cat person, a skeever. You don't want to go down this argument with me, she-pig. So, Solitude was your second city. Your actual start. It was a good start. Luck favored the fool. It didn't. The fool ran out of luck and died. If sharp eyes were to actually clash at this scene, the winking skeever would have been struck by lightning from the sheer animosity between these two. Maven wanted to belittle John, who instantly became disdainful towards her, before bringing up the matter of the fool who died, Maven's child which John killed, Sibby Blackbriar. Maven had to take a few moments before fully holding a grasp of her emotions. If she lets her feelings slip and acts on emotions with him, she is bound to lose dearly. And so, Maven and John had a mouthful of wine each before starting the next round. The girl, Vittoria, you made a lot of wealth by crawling up her bed. I crawled into a lot of beds with many beautiful women, rarely as smart as Vittoria thought. Are you avoiding the feeling of being insulted? That was too subtle to be an insult. Easy to imagine, since you're that thick-skinned. I wonder how you know such a thing. We've never been to bed together, have we? Gee, with an abhorrent brat such as yourself. I was going to say, I don't like Saga whores. Really? That Dunmare woman. What's her name again? Narina? I bet a Saga Dunmare is more to taste. She isn't. John almost frowned at her provocation, but he held his emotions calmly, and poured the wine into a silver cup instead of drinking directly from the bottle. She isn't what? Maven asked, as wanted to corner John. She isn't Saga. Lucky you. She must feel fiery like a real Dunmare. I can only try to imagine her twisting under the kid she raised. Just what kind of twisted imagination did you grow, woman? You're into this mother-son fetish? No wonder your kids are a bunch of screw-ups. John's comeback was hot and steamy that caused Maven to stare at him with genuine anger, but he didn't even stop. They all resemble you to the finest detail, to be honest. Sibby was a sadistic piece of shit who had a thing for murdering people. Hemming is cocky trash who walks with a stick up his ass that goes all the way to his baby brain. And Ingen is simply a poisonous dark child. She's hot, though. Oh, hold on a second. Sadistic, cocky, and poisonous. How come the three sons of the bitch are just little replicas of the mother bitch? For a motherfucker, you really know how to brag. The least I can do, and it is not me who fucks someone as old as their mother or as young as their children. Yes, you made that point. Still, I feel like you're dishonest. You surely fucked someone way older than you are. You got me. Almost a 1,000 years age difference once. Don't look at me. She's a vampire. Wow. Necrophilia. John Dare? That's disgusting. I agree. I meant your imagination. Vampires suck blood to practically remain alive. I thought you would know since you share common ancestry for sure. Sadly, it is vampires and mosquitoes. Who were you again? The sharp atmosphere was unlike any. There is only one feeling shared between those two individuals, and it is pure malice and hatred. When someone hates another, their spite and disdain can't just be masked with a smile or cloaked with words. The true secret of living a long life is to insult the ones you hate right in the face and let all your negative energy out. What was the price of slipping under the Emperor's table through his cousin? For free. Yet again, I don't touch the leftovers you like to pick under that table. But Vittoria, of all women, I heard your wife is quite the beauty herself, and here you are screwing around with different women. Are you shaming me because of that? Maven, I like to say I spent a fortune just trying to figure out who the fathers of your children are. It seemed that you have outdone even me in terms of body count. You can just admit that your abilities are limited. Not really. I just discovered that your children are all really weird. The eldest is surely Hemming, but there is a large gap of age between him and the other two. And judging by his personality and bearing, he is a son of a dog. You, just hear me out. Hemming, your eldest, is the son of an irrelevant man from your followers. I think you probably had him killed at some point. Maybe you have done selective breeding or something. You're way too out of line, John Dare. Come on, I'm just curious. So, after you found your stud, had a child with him, and killed him, you ensured that this child bears the most resemblance to you through the bloodline. Maybe the father was a relative of yours. It is something you repeatedly told that bloodline is more important to you than anything. But until your eldest became an adult, Job smiled and looked at Maven. You nasty whore. You've done it, haven't you? Ha ha ha. You've had children with him. The other two wretches. Maven couldn't stand it any longer and immediately had a dagger darting from her sleeve towards John's chest. However, John immediately caught the blade. Before you make the face, check out Hemming's dialogue with Maven in the wiki. The second one. It can be passed as forgotten cut content, but I am not passing it since it is canon now. Even your martial training is something else. You always had such a powerful aura. John kept going. It seems I was right. Hemming's incompetence was passed to the others, but you still nurtured Sibby to be just like you. Sadly, he is a man, so his instincts and youthful recklessness led him to his death, and your daughter is just a disappointment. John Dare, you filthy rat. Maven could no longer withstand the rage inside her. If I find out that you were the one who killed my son, I'll end everything you ever cared for. I'll burn your city to the ground. I'll RIP everything you love apart, and I'll set it all on fire just so you can watch it burn. John heard Maven's threats and smiled. See, Maven, now you can admit that your abilities are limited, he said. Maven couldn't help but lose part of her strength as John returned her words back at her. If you were that capable, You'd have known who killed you, poor little mutt, a long time ago. John looked at the dagger she was trying to stab him with and smiled. I'd hate to die like your son, slowly dying to someone's sloppy stabs, screaming out my torn lungs, guts spilling from my wounds, eyes tearful with my blood, and my shit and piss spilling on the floor. Must have been painful for you, as an investor, as a mother. It was horrible enough for me. A shocking scene. John looked distant for a moment, then continued as he looked Maven in the eye. Not at all what I intended. You see, by that time, I've never really used magic to kill someone, let alone an avenging ray spell. Maven was frozen by every word John said. She knew it was John, but she was never really sure. Now, he is just handing her the truth. I wanted you to know, it was me. God, I love this so much. I finally get to write it. I've been imagining it since John killed Sibby. Maven was surely filled with rage, fuming from anger, and dying with madness. She turned to John and looked at him with all the hate in the world. He has gained the upper hand on her and overpowered her attempt of undermining or threatening him, even though the dagger is still in her hand. Messenger. But at that time, Maven called a name John didn't recognize. You've kept me waiting long enough. And a voice of a Dunmare man replied. Kill him, Maven shouted and tried to break free from John's perimeter as the space distorted and a bolt of arcane energy struck John from beyond the fabric of space itself. John received the attack and was tossed across the lobby into the wall behind him, breaking it and causing a portion of the inn to collapse over him. And at that time, a man appeared beside Maven Blackbriar wearing a wizard's robe and holding a dwarven staff that radiated blue power. The man was a Dunmare, a dark elf with gray skin, a black beard, and a single eye. His other eye was obviously a prosthetic construct made with dwarven technology, and his right arm seemed mechanical as well. The collapse caused everyone present on the lower floor to panic and rush out of the inn. Have you killed him? Maven asked. No, the Dunmare wizard replied as he put his staff ahead and charged it with a powerful surge of arcane power, aiming it to where John's supposed to be. With a loud reaction, the spell was cast, but as soon as it almost hit the rubble, a hand appeared and completely clutched towards the spell, causing it to implode and dispel itself. An arch-wizard? So, you were prepared. John's voice was heard, and he walked out of the rubble with his robes all torn. His demonic body was revealed, and to those in front of him, it felt otherworldly and intimidating. I've heard a lot about you, John Dare. The wizard spoke. Can't say the same about you. Who are you? John replied. Truthfully, I'm not even interested in the struggle between rich people, but man, you have developed one impossible specimen of a body. Can we exchange some ideas and call it a day? I believe your employer was just talking about killing. That can also be possible, except that I would hate operating on a dead body. I am not a necromancer, so I find value in living specimens. And they say necromancers are trash. For the first time in a long while, John had an opponent who is an archwizard. This time, however, is a proper archwizard. The result of their fight may topple Solitude off the rock it rests on. The archwizard overloaded his magicka, once again ready to fight, but John wasn't intending on playing and summon out something much more horrifying than magicka. Black tattoos started to form on his body, filling it with draconic and tribal patterns from the front, back, arms, legs, and face. John's eyes became all black, his teeth became as dark as onyx as well, and his hair grew darker and darker. John used the chaos infection to its full power, and a sadistic smile appeared on his face. So, we're doing this or what? He asked. The wizard looked at John with his mechanical eye and put his staff down. I think it is a suicide to fight you like that, the arch-wizard said, but I'll look forward to our next meeting. No, you must. Maven almost shouted, but the wizard suddenly wrapped his cloak around her, and the two disappeared from sight as if space siphoned them away. Damn, he just left me here with blue balls, John said and retreated the chaos energy from his mystical tattoo. He finally had his first confrontation with Maven, and she seemed to be very prepared. He couldn't even feel that she had someone hidden in space. But John knew of the wizard associated with her. However, he never imagined him to be an archwizard. It felt exhilarating that there is a worthy opponent in all this mess after all. John checked where he was hit and noticed that he was indeed injured. It felt rather fun rather than painful. So fun that John laughed like a madman as everyone fled the scene. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 627, The Bloody Wedding 3. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. It wasn't really something for John if Maven Blackbriar rallied up a legion of thugs and came at him screaming for war. The appearance of an archwizard, however, was worrying to an extent. If you're an archwizard, you're not an archwizard for nothing. You usually have enough tricks and ideas that would make you a fearsome opponent and a destructive force. That's why John managed to hide for a long time under the skirt of Narina, since the very first thing that was known about him is the fact that he is an apprentice to an archwizard. But now that Maven has her own archwizard, the game is about to get destructive. That archwizard seemed to know a thing or two about Job, and had a good head above his shoulders, seeing how fast he retreated in a fight he wasn't prepared for. Just who is that Dunmare? John wondered. There is no information from the lore I know regarding him. If the Dunmare was in the game, John would immediately recognize him since he has recalled and recorded all the lore he knows, but such a character is so unique that it can't be not lore-worthy. A dwarven staff, an artificial eye with a dwarven design, and a prosthetic arm. And that name Maven called Messenger. He felt dangerous. Lord John Dare, we are honored to have you in our midst. Yet a voice had to break his chain of thoughts. Jarl Elisif, the honor is all mine. John had to stand off his chair in order to greet the Jarl of Solitude. Currently, he was invited to the Court of Solitude on the wedding day a few hours before the ceremony. Thanks to your major contributions in the last trade meeting, I hear we averted a serious famine in the Reach. Elisif said as she dragged the chat with John. John became silent for a second, looked meaningfully at Elisif the fair, the beautiful Jarl of Solitude, and nodded. Yes, things were rather simple. The problem was regarding the workforce. He said, but migrating people from the major cities to establish farming and herding communities, especially in this time of war. This is a brave step. She added, people tend to mess up their priorities when they are fearful. The food stock was endangered because the armies were marching everywhere. The refugees were targeting the big cities, and the bandits were forming up and scraping what they got to find. By putting a strict rule of repopulating the countryside and enforcing the laws by militias and guards, it may have sounded oppressive at first, but the lords would easily start to notice the difference in their granary stocks. By that, they would spare more soldiers to the security of their farming towns rather than sending them to war, and the armies would grow less and less on both sides. This will result in lessening the intensity of battles, and maybe in 10 years, we could just put it all back and find ways to adjust. Indeed, no one thought this would be possible. Elisif said, you just have to beat it into both people and lords in order for no one of them to overstep their roles. John explained. John was lately acting as an advisor to many holds and lords through the Dare Bank of Investment. Many people wanted to get their hands on the easy interest-free loans, but John used it to enforce his ideologies on the businesses he gives money to, and by that, he now gives loans to other lords, then instructs them on how to manage their holdings to maximize the profits and pay him back faster. This may sound like a charity, but John's main goal was to invest in these businesses, and rather than taking interest on his loans, he would take shares in order to share the business's earnings and losses, which was a much more ideal and honest system. The Court of Solitude, as well as the Court of Windhelm, the two main players of the Civil War, were already big clients in the Dare Bank. Add to it the Court of Whiterun, Winterhold, and Mordhau, John was already managing the economy of that much Imperial Skyrim land, even though his main holdings were on Stormcloak territory. What was out of John's control were the court of Riften thanks to the influence of the Blackbriar family, the court of Markarth thanks to the influence of the Silverblood family, and the courts of Falkreath and Dawnstar due to personal grudges between John and their jarls. Let's not hold each other on such a fine day then. I believe that we should start celebrating early for my friend Vittoria, but it seems we have court duties early in the morning, Jarl Elisif said as she headed towards her seat. The court quietened down as Elisif started attending to the business of the hold with her thanes, but John was quick to notice how incompetent she was at handling these kinds of affairs and being very fearful of the imperial authority of General Tullius. While Falkfirebeard, the steward, and Thane Bryling, the main advisor, would always push Elisif to oppose General Tullius, it was quite obvious how her weak personality would get in the way of achieving important things. John got bored fast and snuck out of the court down the main hall with the excuse of feeling hungry. There, he ran into the court wizard of solitude, Sybil Stentor. John Dare. Sybil Stentor, to what do I owe the pleasure? You are in my court, so I am the one who is pleased to meet you, my lord. Thank you, my lady. The two mages greeted each other within expected mannerisms. Greetings aside, you had to make a big ruckus yesterday, Sybil said. Which one? John asked cheekily. I see you have more bravado than the last time you shouted in this court. Ah, the good old days. You have been hunting familiars all night last night, and apparently had to pick a fight with someone very dangerous, Sybil said. The familiars thing aside, what do you know about this man? John asked. I'm rather surprised you know less than I do. Isn't the affairs of Maven Blackbriar more important to you than us? To be honest, despite how many times I try to investigate those pesky Blackbriars, something always gets in the way. I got introduced to that something last night, and I am not pleased to make his acquaintance. So what does Solitude know? He's an outlaw archwizard. And what laws outlaw him? The Imperial Authority seemed to have crossed roads with a Dunmare called Messenger a few times, but they didn't clash directly. He was once hired by the forebears of Solitude, yet he was chased away by King Abbas. I am familiar with the Sultan of Hammerfell. He's an upright man with strong adherence to traditions and laws. If he is against this Messenger, then there's a good reason why. John concluded. Indeed. Also, from what we know, both House Reduran and an authoritative figure in Mournhold, known as the Old Woman, has paid huge sums to Morag Tong to issue writs on that man. Sybil said. Even the Old Woman? And now he is here in Skyrim. John frowned. Yes, he is, Sybil said. The magic society in Skyrim is quite narrow, so we would be of a little help, yet we need you, Lord John, to deal with this man personally, if possible. Sadly, I have much on my hands. John bluntly refused. If he looks for me to cause trouble, I'll deal with him. Aside from that, I have no spare time to waste on him. Understood. Sybil nodded without much reluctance. The two of them smiled at each other in a shallow way before looking around to divert the subject. So that's the infamous Pelagius wing. John pointed towards a certain big sealed door in the palace hall. Yes, that is it, she replied. Why is it still closed? John asked. Excuse me? I think it's common knowledge that it is sealed for a good reason, Sybil said. And does that reason still stand? Well, the Pelagius wing has been a bad omen since the time of Pelagius and Queen Potima, so no one goes in there. Even the guard standing on it would always hear faint noises and creepy itches from inside. So it has stayed in this state for ages. Dear me. John wondered when did the situation have to stay like that? After all, the Pelagius wing isn't dangerous anymore since Sheogorath and the ghost of Emperor Pelagius the Mad have both been evicted. John personally did that almost 3 years ago. Maybe the wing was sealed for a number of years while the two mad entities were playing around, so the people just didn't notice it was cleared. Why don't you and I go on a field trip into the Pelagius wing? John asked Sybil. If that's the way you seduce girls, Lord John, then I am badly not interested. Sybil replied. Bah, I wouldn't seduce you even if my life depended on it. John waved his hand and headed towards the Pelagius wing alone. Lord John, I must warn you. I've been detecting Daedric presence in that wing for years. It won't do us good if we just go in with everyone in close proximity to this place. Sybil caught up to John while trying to stop him. Really? John looked at her nonchalantly. I thought the few hundred wards you placed on this place alone would take care of Maroon's Dagon himself if he showed up. Sybil stopped her pace and considered John's words. Now I feel flattered, she said. Don't be. The Daedric presence coming from inside just needs to be exorcised. John said, if it was an entity living within, we would certainly feel it once we go in. It is mostly incorporeal. And why would that stop us, I wonder? John said, so as he went to the door of the Pelagius wing and tried to open it. Let me just bring you the key. I have a copy. Click. Yet the door opened in John's hands. That was lockpicks. Nasty little devils, they are. John said, waving a small blade and a lockpick around. That's a lock made by the best locksmith in all the land. Sybil said, pointing towards the door. I'm pretty sure Wolfer doesn't build locks for you. John replied and went in. Sybil had to follow him inside, as she kept her key in her pocket and nervously proceeded. The inside of the Pelagius wing was vast, but dark and dusty. It looked like its version from the game, which John played in the past despite the rest of the palace looking more like its modded version. Still, the place was quiet and eerie. John evoked 2 spells on his left and right to call a few mouse familiars to run around the place and cast candlelight wisps towards the dark corners of the place. Soon after, a battle of real rodents and magical ones started to take place, and all the rats and skeever infesting the Pelagius wing were masqueraded by John, using magic to get rid of rats that infest an old house. It is like hitting a mosquito with a greatsword. Sybil mocked John. More like, why wouldn't you do such a thing from the start and leave the place to rot like this? John asked. A wizard's skill shouldn't be degraded to do something so mundane, Lord John. Sybil replied. That mindset, John said as the way he looked at Sybil changed. Altmaier had a way of thinking that magic, such as all sacred things, shouldn't be used in things that bring disdain to the caster, such as cleaning things with magic. They viewed magic as a holy power that comes from their alleged origin, Aetherius. Thus they view the arcane as something that should be separated from the mundane. Of course, Sybil is no Altmaier, but she adopts the same way of thinking. On the other side of this school of thought, John stands on the front that believes in adopting magic in all aspects of the mundane life shall bring more advancement and understanding to the world. After all, Winterhold was built on that basis, and it is the closest thing John could build to a utopia. He didn't entertain Sybil's thoughts and ignored her until the search was done. No Deidre here so far. I think we already flipped the place upside down and all the windows were opened. It looks nice now that it gets some sun. John said to Sybil, who was hiding in a shadowy corner. It was nice when it was dark, though, she said in vexation. Tell Falk Firebeard that I cleaned the place while we were at it, John said, and started heading down towards the main hall of the Blue Palace before Jarl Elisif headed out to the wedding. As Sybil followed him while avoiding every ray of sunshine, the two heard a ruckus coming from the main hall. What is going on? Sybil immediately took the lead and asked the nearest guard to the scene. A common villager was standing in the middle of 5 guards, as he was simply trying to meet the Jarl and demanding an audience. My lords, how can this be? A man comes and asks to meet their lord, and you push him away? This is unacceptable. How can you do this? The 8 frown upon you. Ismir's beard. What's going on down there? The shouting attracted Falk Firebeard, who came from above to see what was going on. This man came from Dragonbridge and claimed that he hears howls at night and feels the earth shake. A guard replied, and Falk asked, It is just the storm from a few days ago, sir. The guard said, No, it is not a storm. That one was no natural storm. The villager said as he struggled among the guards, And not just the storm, my lord, it happens every night now. John watched the scene on the internet and said nothing as he did do something. An unnatural storm, wind howling, earth shaking. If he connects the dots together along with the date, it would be that night he and Sirana had a never mind. Varnius, this is the third time you come, and today is not suitable. Fox said to the man addressing him with that name. Varnius. The name clicked in John's mind. Howls. Earth shakes. It is not what he thought first. Fox. John called. Lord John. Fox seemed startled by John, who kept his presence thin till now. A man of your hold is coming to seek help from his Jarl. You truly are going to let him down? But Fox spoke with a tired face. Today is an important day, as you know. Also, we investigated this situation before, and we suspect it is the Stormcloaks. We also can't spare the men during these critical times. Fox said. John found something that put him in a very excellent mood right away. Then I'll offer my help in this matter. John stepped in right away and looked at the man with an opportunistic smile. I am John Dare, and I'm going to solve your problem, inshallah. With thumbs up. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 628, The Bloody Wedding 4. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Soft warning, big chapter, and you might want to brace yourself for this one. The day was as good as any in terms of weather, but it was extraordinarily bright when it came to John's mindset at the moment. After all, he received some good news this morning. Truthfully, he was looking forward to this quest for ages, but he failed to get leads on how to initiate it or how to find its location. When it came to the game in real life, there was a massive difference, especially in terrain, so unless the place is a known landmark, there's no way he would find a cave hidden in some mountain unless he does some rigorous excavating and brings a team with him. So he waited for the opportunity, and here it was. But that's not the time for it anyway. He has to wait for his cake in order to eat it properly. Right now, however, is the time for Vittoria's wedding, an event that he can't miss for the world. Also, he was acting so openly with a wide smile on his face. Many believed in the rumor regarding John Dare and Vittoria Vici, so those many were anticipating the look on his face now that his girlfriend is being taken away, the thing that made his smile seem more unsettling. Either way, John is an oddball, so there's no way of knowing what goes in under his red hair. But that day was a day of celebration. This doesn't mean that people will celebrate as much as they seek opportunity and try to reap as many benefits as they can. That was especially true for the imperial guests who would flock around their Nord counterparts in the various fields in order to exchange knowledge and connections. Still, John secluded himself and rudely took a seat between Solitude's secret lovers, the steward Falk Firebeard and Thane Bryling. The two exchanged awkward looks as John remained seated chewing on some fruits. During this, a woman passed and stood in front of John, looking extensively at his face. John met eye to eye with her, but neither of them was taking any initiative first until she decided to talk. He didn't have to die, you know, the woman said. John didn't move his eyes off her, nor did he stop chewing. The only instance he did was when he wanted to grab another apple from the table in front of him. Falk Firebeard stood up and cleared his throat before trying to introduce the woman unpleasantly. This girl here is the sister of the late Thane, Falk said, but John interrupted. Gisli. John said the woman's name. I know who she is. Of course, Gisli is a character from the game and the family of one of John's most annoying enemies, Thane Eriker. I know that your people took him. I know you may have him alive till now. Gisli seemed to be trying to say something, but John interrupted her speech. He isn't, he said. The phrase was so direct that it only meant that John Dare had Thane Eriker executed at some time. While Thane Eriker's actions were later criminalized, his fall into the hands of the people of Winterhold 3 years ago was his final downfall. He just admitted that he killed a man before even putting him to trial. A man who was one of the top political movers in Skyrim. Ow! Gisli asked as her eyes became filled with tears How? Ask my wife. She's the one who had to deal with him. John replied with zero chills as he started peeling another fruit. Of course, he knows how Eriker's life ended. Alina was sadistic enough to almost have that man skinned alive, but she later put him to Jeliner's mercy that wasn't any better than her. He lasted as much as a month just because the two of them were trying to make him live for as much as possible. And they even gave him a name called Gecko. That's the part of the story he would never tell, since he wasn't even interested in the fate of an enemy that had no honor. Falk Firebeard finally had Gisli escorted away as she was too devastated to be left alone. On the other hand, he couldn't help but feel both angry and fearful toward John. Whatever happened to Eriker, it surely happened during the life of High King Torrig, a clear disrespect to kill someone's Thane outside their jurisdiction. But those who know what Eriker had done had no way of speaking their complaints regarding that matter in front of John, the one who was hurt the most by Eriker's actions. The bride and the groom have arrived, a bard announced, and that's when the wedding's main characters came in. All the attendants stood on the way in the castle's temple as the music was played smoothly, announcing the start of the ceremony. Vittoria Vici walked down from a carriage as Asgir Snowshod met her down and offered his arm for her to lean on. She was wearing a white dress covered from the outside by a long red garment and wore a circlet of flowers over her head. The look on his face wasn't that of a man who was getting married, and the look on hers was cheerful and full of smiles. The situation seemed perplexing to those who stood near to them, but what made it even stranger is the look on the faces of the family members of the groom and the bride. Vittoria's mother, Countess Alexia Vici, was frowning at every living soul since she didn't like this marriage from the start. It was Count Vici that pushed the affair onto their daughter, and ironically, he didn't bother to attend, which made the Countess very upset. The Snowshod clan, on the other hand, were quite opposite to their son Asgir. It wasn't that they were pleased, but rather they realized the importance of this marriage and how much it can benefit them to have the Emperor's daughter as part of their clan. This can ultimately end the bloodshed, while it would leave Skyrim forever divided into the eastern old holds of the Stormcloaks and the western new holds of the Empire. Either way, it would benefit them greatly either way it goes. There was a lack of attendance when it came to the Stormcloak envoys, since they didn't want to walk into the stronghold of their enemy just to dine and celebrate while their brethren are sharpening their axes on the battlefield. John scanned the crowd, carefully looking for any suspicious faces, which led him to notice Maven Blackbriar, who seemed to be hiding behind a score of Imperial soldiers. He also noticed some movement on the roof of the castle, and many watching eyes here and there. In the end, he chose to sit back and relax as the bride and groom were seated to receive the blessings of the divines before the actual ceremony. He even displayed a lot of friendliness as he gathered many people around him and started telling them stories of his travels and adventures. There's a lot of wealth spent on this wedding, and many people wanted to benefit from it, some more than the others, and some over the others' interests. Those who stood at the top of this list were the Blackbriar clan for sure, but those who stood a step higher were none other than them. John noticed them for sure as his alarm spell started ticking in his head. They were moving at last. 1 at the eastern entrance of the temple, 2 at the western entrance, 3 on the roof, 1 in the middle of the guests. That last one, it was her, Serana. John looked towards Vittoria, who took a minute before noticing his gaze towards her and realizing that the plan was in motion. Her smile finally died down, and she became somewhat nervous. I'll go ahead with the speech now. Vittoria stood up and announced to her maids. Why so soon? Asgir Snowshod, who was sitting just beside her, asked with a sour look on his face. He was sure that his soon-to-be wife wanted to skip pleasantries to the actual ceremony and call it a day. Vittoria also didn't give him any heed and walked to the stairway leading up to the ceremonial balcony of the temple and emerged from there. The guards moved to organize her security, and the attendants moved to get a good angle to witness the bride's speech. It was a tradition that the host of the wedding should thank the attendants of an event for their gifts, but it wasn't Asgir who would do it, but rather Vittoria, which is odd. Still, this is an imperial castle, and she is the emperor's cousin, Many complications were involved here. Dear guests from faraway lands, dear people of solitude, dear neighbors, brothers, and sisters. Vittoria greeted the crowd and steeled her nerves before continuing. I just wanted to take this time to thank you all for being here. To thank you for sharing this wonderfully happy day with myself and my new husband. Are you all enjoying yourselves? Please eat, drink, and make merry on this most happy of days. My husband and I thank you for coming to our reception. We thank you for sharing the love we have for each other, she said, and turned to Asjir, who paused a second before smiling enough not to cause a scene. Finally, she moved to the last words. May you all be as happy in your lives as I know I will be in mine. Thank you again for swoosh. And in the next second, an arrow was seen resting in Vittoria's chest, and around where it struck, the white dress was being painted red, mixing up with the outer garment she's wearing. Vittoria looked at the arrow as her vision became dizzy. Then she raised her hands up, but suddenly lost all the strength in her body and fell down from the balcony. No! A strong scream of anger and sadness echoed in the sky as the crowd descended into madness. Assassins! Run! They're everywhere! The bride has been killed. Save yourselves! There is no longer a solution out of this madness, and every man was to themselves except for a single man who stood over Vittoria's body with dark expressions. I'll kill you! I'll kill you, you bastards! I'll kill you all! John Dare's voice shook the heaven as a great sword emerged in his right hand. Right away, he turned around and threw the heavy weapon towards an assassin that was blending in the crowd. The assassin was immediately impaled by the blade and carried by the force of its throw to the castle wall before getting pinned against it. John didn't stop there. He pulled the blade back with telekinesis and launched it toward another assassin, splitting the man in half as the blade was rammed into the other wall. He then pulled the great sword again with telekinesis and started hurling it at all the assassins in sight. Shit! Escape! Now! One of the assassins, an Argonian known as Viezra, pulled the one who shot the arrow from her shoulder and lowered their heads down. That man, the one who shot the arrow, Serena, decided to go down and initiate the escape. John Dare, Viezra replied, believe it or not, we tried to assassinate him once in this same cursed city. Didn't go well. This time, he's much stronger and we will be caught if we face him. It seemed that Viezra was unwilling to even think about the idea of facing John Dare. Serana knew that John Dare is the mastermind of this whole scene, but to witness firsthand how he manipulates both his enemies and his allies to serve his agendas. In a way, she was impressed. In another, she was terrified. She decided to retreat and waited for Viezra to initiate the signals. Now, he waved his hands to more assassins who were hiding around the roofs, and a hail of arrows descended towards all the guests in the hall. Shit! Inside the hall, John saw the arrows coming down and filled his lungs with air. F-U-S-R-O-D-H. The shout broke everything up in the sky, and all the arrows that were meant to make a massacre of the guests were scattered to nothing. However, that was not the purpose of these arrows, as the actual purpose was to delay John Dare long enough in order to escape. Indeed, they managed to escape, as both Viezra and Serana had already climbed the ropes and reached the roof. Viezra then wanted to give more orders to the assassins he put on the roof, yet suddenly, a terrible situation happened. Those who were stationed on the roofs were all thugs, mercenaries, and anti-imperial rebels that got hired by the Brotherhood to cause scenes and act as lackeys. It was expected from them to be nothing special in front of a powerhouse assassin, but that wasn't even good enough to describe what was going on. A figure in black appeared on the roof of the castle, and like the wrath of the Edra and the Daedra, the figure worked their blade into those lackeys as if they were mere blades of grass. That figure had an average build, but a natural feminine body that was blessed with a lot of agileness and swiftness. Once that figure stopped, all the ones who stood in its way were laying on the ground bleeding. The woman was standing on the other side of the roof with the hall in between the two parties. She noticed the two individuals who stood up there and did two things. The first, she pushed a piece of the wall with her leg to fall down on the ceremonial balcony and squish down the groom, this jeer snowshot. The second, she walked to Viezra and Sarana and took her mask down. Seeing the face was one thing. Reacting to it was another. Both Viezra and Sarana were quite familiar with that face, which left an unforgivable impact on them. Look who's here. Not who I expected to see. Nope, that's a lie. I expected to see one of you. The other is completely unexpected. Hey, anyway, the woman said. You. Maybe, Both Sarana and Viezra reacted at the same time before realizing that the other knows this person they are up against. Maybe, Sarana asked. Oh, that's the name of a girl who died long, long ago. The woman replied. You look pretty much alive to me. Viezra spoke hatefully. We knew that you were alive all that time. Don't think that we just didn't realize that. Still, I am dead to you all, isn't it? Shouldn't it be kept that way? Or do you wish for the decline of your little band of killers to be courted so soon? The woman replied with an insane smile. She's one of us. Sarana asked. Was. Viezra replied as he readied himself for a fight. She's bad news now. As I said, the girl named Mabia died under this castle a long time ago. I met a god and he resurrected me. Now I live in his worship. Isn't he just amazing? The woman said, I go by Jelliner now. My god is right over there. Jelliner was obviously referring to John, who was waving the greatsword around with telekinesis and making a scene as he slaughtered all the assassins down there. John was indeed displaying a great effort in discovering the assassins hiding around, moving the blade, killing them, and protecting the crowd all at the same time. He even conjured 6 frost Atronak to lift up the castle gates for the crowd to flee through. But in the end, it was all too obvious and not obvious at the same time. It was all just a display after all, making a sword fly around and kill some assassins with it. It may look impressive, but John could have just subdued all those assassins in a few seconds rather than acting like that. He could have escorted the attendants to the safety of the temple rather than setting them loose in the city. A great plan was happening, a plan within a plan. Either way, I think this all for now. Jelliner said as she smiled back at Viezra and Sarana. So, we're fighting John Dare's famous dog, Jelliner the Mad. Viezra raised his twin daggers as he said so. Well, John only told me to get rid of all the pests on the roof until my target starts moving. Jelliner shrugged her shoulders. Then we shall. Viezra was about to initiate his attack, but Sarana suddenly held his shoulder and jumped with him off the roof. What are you doing? Viezra asked. Don't you see? Sarana said as she landed with Viezra on the roof of a different building. We are not her targets. The two of them looked at the smiling Jelliner as she snorted and looked the other way before disappearing off the castle's roof herself. They may have survived Sarana, but which poor fool was about to meet their end on her blade? Back in the castle, John finished off all the assassins and rushed towards Vittoria's body. There was much preparation that needed to be done in this tight window of time before the place gets flooded with imperial soldiers and curious nobles. Looking around, many corpses were littering the ground, from assassins to soldiers to unfortunate guests. John made sure that the important people rushed to the streets where they should take care of themselves. The guards and the Legion will have a tough time calming the crowd, especially since John made them all run through a single way out. The priests, the nobles, the jarls, and the guests all together are now running in the streets and seeking help. It is time to see things through, and Jelliner should have made her move. Her first target was obviously a jeer snowshot. The second target, secure the place. Hunt down the assassins. Tell the guards captain to make sure of everyone's safety. Legate Rika of the Imperial Legion stormed the temple ground and paused at the site of the great massacre. She then saw John sitting in front of the body of Vittoria Vici. Lord John, Lady Vittoria, is she? Rika asked. She's with Kine. John replied in a heavy tone. This is, heavens be with us. That's the Emperor's cousin. Rika said as she felt the scale of the crisis they are in. Inform your general to prepare an imperial funeral. I'm going to hunt down the rest of the assassins myself. John stood up as he recalled the great sword he was waving just a moment ago. Lord John, you need to coordinate with us. We need prisoners to interrogate. Rika shouted at him. I left many of them alive. Do your job, Legate, John said, and walked out of the castle fuming with all the rage in the world. In a faraway location, many of the wedding's important guests were rushing through the streets with their bodyguards. They were mostly escorted by their thanes and bodyguards away from the open streets, through the alleys and the hidden routes. The most important of those guests was none other than the Jarl of Solitude, Elisif the Fair. She ran and ran, but all she had was some guards. She couldn't even get in touch with Falk Firebeard or Bryling. Even Balgir Bearclaw, her housecarl, was caught in fighting some assailants. This was just way too sudden, way too terrifying. It felt as if everything was turning into chaos all of a sudden. John Dare saved her life in the castle. The guards saved her life outside. Some assassins were trying to attack from all the locations, and many rebel groups and anti-imperial used the situation for sure, but this was moving to a dangerous point. When the guards raised their shields above their heads in order to cover her from any archer on the roof, Elisif could see something in the distance. Spark, spark, slash, swoosh. A blade of a strange shape rushed towards the guards, taking in weird angles and curving and bouncing off the walls. Elisif immediately lowered her head, and the guards who tried to block the blade got their arms sliced off. Not only one blade, but a stream of them followed, and every guard who stood in their way was completely shredded. Elisif watched the blades as the blood splattered and covered her dress and face. She saw the blades fall on the ground, then suddenly stand up and roll back like wheels on the ground. Finally, these circular blades joined together and became one before rolling over to someone's feet. Good day to you, Jarl Lady. The owner of the circular blades walked to Elisif with a cold, sadistic smile. No, you. Why? Elisif couldn't believe who the owner of the blades was as she tried to run away as fast as she could. Jelinar put her compact chakram on her side and picked a sword from the ground before throwing it into Elisif's back to come out of her chest. Elisif could barely stand as she held the blade coming off her chest. She looked at it with bitter eyes and fell on her knees before collapsing on her face with cold, motionless eyes. Sorry, I really like you, but nothing personal, Jarl Lady. Jelinar giggled as she said so. The circlet of the Jarl she used to wear rolled off her head, then fell on the ground. On this day, 3 important figures died. The groom, Esgir Snowshod, heir to the Snowshod clan and a major contributor to the wealth of the Blackbriars. The bride, Vittoria Vici, overseer of the EEC branch in Skyrim, daughter of Count Vici, and cousin of the Emperor. The Jarl of Solitude, Elisif the Fair, widow of High King Torig, and the puppet of the Empire. Chaos is just the start of what is going to happen afterward. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 629. What happened in Solitude? Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL. https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra 12 chapters. John ran through the streets and pulverized all the assassins he ran into, as they were all non-essential mob characters that didn't matter the slightest. None of them were game characters, so little did he care. The Dark Brotherhood was not only composed of the handful of members that the players know, but they rather made some branches and foot soldiers that were originally just some bandits and other outlaws. It seemed that Astrid realized that with the existence of all these powerhouses in one place, she needs a lot of distractions in order to let her people in and out safely. It was a good plan altogether. But this plan would allow hundreds of variables to take place. For example, slipping some thugs within the thugs hired by the assassins in order to cause a scene elsewhere. As an adaptation to that, John managed to gather some guards of Solitude and personally led them to subjugate most of the thugs before rescuing the key figures of Solitude, namely Falk Firebeard and Thane Bryling, then heading to where Jarl Elisif should be. But the scene of the demise of Jarl Elisif was nothing to be expected except for those who plotted it. "No, my Jarl. Milady." Both Bryling and Falk rushed towards where they saw Elisif's corpse and tried to lift her up, but she was cold and unmoving. Jarl Elisif of Solitude is dead with a blade through her back and a dozen guards lying dead in shreds around her. John sighed heavily and covered his face. On this day, he had to kill his friend's widow in order to save Skyrim from an ill fate. The situation in Solitude sent ripples all across Skyrim and from it to the Empire. In the span of 3 days, the entire world knew what happened in Solitude. The Elder Council of the Empire was held, and the Emperor issued a warrant to the Imperial Authority in Skyrim that they must eradicate all the assassins as soon as possible before the arrival of Emperor Titus II to Skyrim, as he insisted on attending the funeral of his cousin Vittoria and his loyal vassal Jarl Elisif. But that wasn't what plagued the minds of those who were present in the Court of Solitude. All the Thanes were mourning Jarl Elisif for the 3rd day. The embalmers have done their jobs and preserved the body of Jarl Elisif in the snow before the day of the funeral, which was yesterday. On the 1st day, Vittoria Vici and her would-have-been husband were moved to the Hall of the Dead on their wedding night to be cremated as per Vittoria's will, and the day after was the young and innocent Jarl Elisif. The scale of the crisis was simply too massive and destructive. Some thought it was the end of times even. That was the case for Falk Firebeard, who sat in the court alone with his fingers tearing through his beard and hair. In this very hall, he parted with 2 lords that he faithfully served, and both were littered in their blood. High King Torg by the shout of Ulfric that shattered his body, and Jarl Elisif by an assassin's blade. What would history write of this moment? 2 Jarls killed almost a year apart. The failure of Solitude's court to protect the city's most important people. The epic failure that will bring downfall to the Western Holds. That was totally the end of the world to Falk Firebeard, the steward of the Blue Palace of the magnificent city of Solitude, the advisor of High King Torg, and the most loyal Nord in Skyrim. "You're going to remain like this?" Across the throne room, a woman concealed in heavy robes asked. Falk moved his reddened eyes towards the woman to see Sybil Stentor, court wizard of the palace. Usually, people would avoid being alone with that woman who has a terrible feeling of hunger in her eyes, but Falk found it ironic how he wouldn't mind getting his neck torn by that vampire at all. He would just give all up at the moment and go see Torg so he can apologize to him. "Yesterday, we laid her body in this hall for the last farewell, the same as we did last year, with the High King," Falk said as he dangled his head down. "Yes, that's tragic," Sybil said as she tried to show sincerity, but her cold tone didn't help. "What I keep asking myself is, where were you, Lady Sybil?" Falk stood off his seat and pointed fingers toward Sybil. "I was here, Falk," she replied, taking a defensive tone. "Doing what?" he asked, but then answered, "Your job? Your job to keep Solitude and its Jarl safe?" "Falk, I hope you're not letting your grief take the best of you." Sybil spoke reservedly. "To oblivion with my grief," Falk shouted as he faced Sybil with his anger. "Your magic was supposed to warn us of an enemy attack." Sybil seemed offended by Falk's attitude and replied with the same tone he used. "My magic is only about scrying Stormcloak armies. The city's security is the city watch business." Sybil lashed back at him, but seemed rather dispirited, and her rage died down. Falk as well looked away before turning back and apologizing in a single word. For those two, it is just frustrating how everything kept going wrong ever since Torg's death. They lorded over Solitude for a long time, but now they lost everything in a single second. They should have prepared themselves for everything. Since the death of Torg, all the opposition parties that dwelled in Solitude were chased out, and the city was purged from any danger that may threaten the Jarl, and thus her court. They were extremely certain that even with the arrival of so many guests, they were all peaceful and willing to make peace. That only leaves one option. We have a traitor in our midst. Fox said. I can't shake that idea off my head, Fox. Sybil replied with a distant feeling. Who can it be? I'm not sure. Fox said, but whoever benefits from this is the one who did it. Bryling? Sybil asked. Impossible. Fox would have shouted if this conversation was just a regular meeting, but his face showed how much he rejected the mere notion of Bryling's betrayal. First, Thane Bryling is his lover. Second, she is the most lawful and loyal Nord in all Skyrim. Then where is she now? Sybil asked calmly. Doing what she does best. Fox replied, taking action. Sybil nodded. You are right, she said. I am sorry. It's fine. In times like these, when a brother slays his brother, it is natural to suspect anyone. Sigh by a smear. The two remained silent for a while, but Fox looked around and tried to act in an organized manner. We should attend to our business. King Torrig had no heir save for Lady Elisif. Lady Elisif belonged to the clan of Jarl Torrig, but with their death, there is no clan for us to serve. What about Elisif's mother clan? Clan Fairhair? Sybil asked. An outer clan, a hidden one. They worship the old gods and reject the imperial cult. They don't partake in ruling, and they have no claim over solitude. Neither do they have the interest. Fox replied. They are excellent shield thanes, and some of them are even knighted in High Rock and Cyrodiil. Such a shame. Sybil shook her head. Right now, they need a new employer. Someone to lead solitude and manage things before somebody else takes over. I can't think of anyone. Fox said. If Thane Erikr was alive, he would have raced for the throne of solitude. Then nobody wants to be Jarl? Sybil asked in a strange tone. Nobody wants the power or the authority. As I said, the only one I could think of taking such an initiative would have been Erikr. But we all saw what Alina Dare made him into. Fox shrugged his shoulders. Erikr would have sold us all to his Thalmor masters. Sybil said, I know that nobody wants to be a puppet for the Empire on Solitude's throne, but fuck it. Exactly. Fox nodded. Fuck it. The situation was bleak, as it seemed. We're already out of allies, aren't we? Sybil asked. There's John Dare. Fox replied. He wouldn't be Jarl, would he? Sybil asked. You want him to? Fox frowned. 1,000 curses. No, I'd lose my job. Sybil replied. But we need his opinion, and his authority now more than ever. Why? Fox laughed sarcastically. So we can fall into more depths for him. You see another option? She asked. Sigh. Where is he? Fox asked back. The Pelagius Wing. He spent the last few days there. To meditate. Sybil said. I heard you unsealed the place. Isn't it too strange that such misfortune strikes when a cursed place is unsealed? Fox asked suspiciously. What are you, an old woman? Sybil asked in an annoyed manner. Last I checked, curses don't send out assassins. Fine, take us to him, Fox said, and made way for Sybil to walk ahead of him. It was vexing how they had to turn to John Dare in the end, the thing they were trying to avoid for 3 days straight. John Dare is an absolute powerhouse in Skyrim, and his authority goes as high as Ulfric's Stormcloak and the Empire. Even the Jarls listen to him. The problem is that the Court of Solitude is in huge debt to John Dare, both literally and figuratively. They take a lot of loans from the Dare Bank of Investment in exchange for trade convenience contracts, tax exemption, and exclusive resources contracts. That aside, John was a big player in many political situations that occurred in Solitude for the past few years, and while they caused him trouble, he would always show up for help. Relying on him made it feel like they can't function without him, which in their current situation was absolutely true. They were just reluctant to admit it. But now they stood in front of a room where John stayed in the Pelagius Wing of the Blue Palace. They knocked on it thrice and waited. John didn't reply, but the door was slowly opened. Still, rather than seeing the towering figure of John Dare blocking the door, the one who opened was barely taller than the doorknob. Her head was hairless, and her skin and face were covered in feral netic tattoos. She was a little girl that looked a bit old for her short height, yet she gave Fox a creepy feeling as he hid behind Sybil. Sybil herself was questioning who that girl was. Yes, the girl asked. We came to see Lord John. Sybil spoke. The girl didn't reply, but rather opened the door to reveal the room inside. The room was on a corner of the building, thus 2 of its walls were windowed. Those 2 windows were open and gusts of cold wind were storming through the empty room. The only piece of furniture was a simple wooden chair where the towering figure of John Dare sat as he closed his eyes and kept muttering fast, unrecognizable words. Seeing his face, John seemed to have grown a beard in mere 3 days, which felt ridiculous how a body of such a man worked. A beard of this length would take 3 months to grow, not 3 days. Is he doing magic? Fawk asked. Not sure, Sybil replied. Sort of. The girl with tattoos replied over and continued. He's on his way back. Both Fawk and Sybil reacted with the same look of ignorance as they turned to the girl, but in the next second, a beam of golden light and dragon roars flowed through the window and settled in John's body, making an aura of shimmering light, which faded slowly. John opened his eyes, which were all golden, as they faded back into their normal frost blue, and he looked at the 3 individuals in his room. Bothia, he spoke. The name was not just ominous, but terrifying to both Sybil and Fawk. The name of a dreadful Daedric lord that feeds on struggle and discord. Yes, the little girl ran towards him as if she was the one who was called. This is Mr. Fawk Firebeard, the steward of this palace. And that is Magus Sybil Stentor, the court wizard. Show respect when you face them, girl, John said, educating the girl. Greetings, the girl said, and like magic, the tattoos on her face and head faded away. That Fawk was on the verge of hiding behind Sybil again. Mystic tattoos, such a rare talent, Sybil exclaimed. She's Bothia, my disciple, John said. Greetings, child, Fawk replied, but that's quite the name. People call me Beth. Only Master calls me by my birth name. Beth said. Bothia as a birth name? Sybil asked. She was born with a rare mystic talent, which led her parents to offer her to the cult of Bothia, and gaining such a precious child. She was named Bothia, as the Daedric prince used her to commune with her mortal servants. I ran into her in Hammerfell and decided to claim her from the hands of the Daedric prince as my disciple. However, it is unfair to prosecute someone by their birth name, so I don't mind calling her that, John said as he patted Beth back just like a parent. Rather than feeling worried, Fawk felt touched by the story. Such a heroic act is one of the many things the bards will never know to write songs about. Fawk said, Thank you. John smiled. That just now, Sybil mentioned the meditation John was doing. Was it astral projection? It was. John nodded. The out-of-body experience helps very greatly during the process of meditation. The world becomes your playground. The universe becomes your backyard. And you can be one with the cosmic powers that shape this prison-like reality. Fawk didn't understand a word, and Sybil made a dejected face. Since she is a vampire, she can never attain the degree of mastery John has acquired in this part of the arcane arts. He can breathe at the same pace as the universe and break the boundaries between the arcane and the mundane. Do you meditate for good health or peace of mind? Fawk asked, but Beth and Sybil looked at him critically since his question was simply way out of point. John, however, smiled. I was praying, John replied. To the gods. Fawk asked again. To the souls of Torig and Elisif. John answered the heaviest answer this room could hear. I see. I just wanted to apologize to King Torig. I prayed that he would forgive me, John said, and his face turned dark. Oh, both Sybil and Fawk didn't expect that answer at all since John's voice carried genuine sadness to it. I'm sure the late High King would forgive us all. He was a gentle soul, Sybil said. John smiled faintly with a heavy feeling looming around him before nodding. Anyway, I think I stayed in solitude long enough. Unless you need anything from me, I'll finish my business and leave by tomorrow morning. John stood off the chair and offered a handshake to Fawk, who stuttered right away. Lord John, please. There. We can't. We are in dire need of your help. Fawk said. My help? John frowned. All right. Anything you ask. I'll try to be in service for solitude to the best of my ability. The faces of the steward and the court wizard brightened as they heard him and immediately told him what they discussed and shared their thoughts and fears with him. In a way, they seemed to be asking to sail in his boat until the storm passes. I understand. John nodded. The Court of Solitude is bound to lose most of its authority, if not all of it, to the imperial authority of General Tullius, if things were left unattended. General Tullius will indeed close this place down and run the city like a military encampment. Fox said, We've barely kept his hands from taking funds from the city's treasury, but right now, it is only a matter of time before he gets his hands on the keys to everything. We need to regain the people's trust in the Court of Solitude as soon as possible. Sybil added. The two of them looked at John, waiting for a suggestion. What you said about those who benefited first from the death of Jarl Elisif is indeed right. The one who will attempt to make most of the looting will be the real killer, so we have to be careful on our next steps. John agreed with them. Which are? Fox asked. What you need to garner the trust of the people is a face that can either be a figurehead or a true charismatic leader. After that, you need a series of achievements and heroics stuck to that leader, not just their good name. If we don't do that, the party responsible for the death of Jarl Elisif will start pushing their candidate on his solitude. John put a plan. And who will be our candidate? Sybil asked. One of two, John said, raising two fingers. Then he turned to Fox Firebeard. The first is you, Fox. Fox's eyes widened. I'll be respectfully denying you, and I don't even know why you would consider me. Fox backed away as if heard some sort of taboo. You're a good man, which is a rare quality. John said. That won't be enough, sir. I'm not the man for the job. Fox completely backed away. Then we have only one candidate. They are a true patriot with a real Nord's heart, someone all the people of Solitude look up to and wholeheartedly respect, John said. No, Fox refused even before John said the name. She is the only suitable person we will ever find. John said. That's going to be hard. She will refuse for sure. Sybil said. It has to be her. John said. No way. Fox refused even more than when he refused the position himself. I won't put her in this situation. Ever. I'm sorry, Fox. But if it is not Thane Bryling, I am afraid there's no option but to submit to whoever comes next. The candidate that fits the vacant Jarl position is only one woman in the entirety of Solitude. Thane Bryling, the most honest and brave individual in this city. Also the most stubborn and traditional one. After a long argument that lasted till sunset, Fox Firebeard and Sybil Stentor walked out of John's room with their heads filled with John's words and plans. It was safe to say that he accounted for everything and everyone from planning to positions to accomplishments. All they needed was Bryling's consent, and everything will just go as it should be. Fox, with a heavy heart, couldn't shake off the fact that his lover is going to be placed on the most dangerous seat in Skyrim, and becomes the hinge that balances the scale which carries the Empire in Skyrim. It is a terrifying position, and since Torig's death, there was just a stale peace between the Blue Palace and the Imperial Authority, so it was time to sail into those shallow waters seriously this time. John watched the two leave and sat back on his chair, watching the sunset over the mountains to the west. Tomorrow will be one hell of a day. He sighed. Master, how was it? Beth asked as she stood beside him. While Mirdia is agitated that I left her temple in ruins for all this time, Bothia is pleased with what happened. The shift of the power scale shall make the prince of political intrigue cry from joy. John said, I would love to see Bothia crying from joy indeed. Beth nodded. Keep an ear on what is happening in Castledower. While they sent me an incredible gift not long ago, I feel bad for them this time. Truly. John smiled, but he still couldn't shake off the heavy feeling he had in his heart. Elisif's death was necessary for Skyrim. While she was Jarl, she never wanted peace and always encouraged the fight against Ulfric to avenge Torig. But that's only half of the plan. The other half is the most critical part of this plan to retake and remake Skyrim through Solitude. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL, https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter Zero In for extra 12 chapters. Chapter 630, The Gray Wolf Movement. It's my birthday. I'm 27 now. God, I'm old. This past year was a good year for my life, even though I'm a slow-ass writer. God has blessed me with marriage and good luck. I am thankful. I hope the best for you all. Let's finish this novel before I get 30. Peace, y'all. While John's advice put a clear route to the future solitude, some complications were coming towards the court that is currently left without a Jarl. There was a clear shift of administrative power that suddenly went towards the castle as the imperial authority was starting to take over everything. While they were clearly and openly overstepping their authority, there was no actual authority to oppose them, and the entire Court of Solitude was still in shambles. After all, the imperial authority is the one that will put a Thane on the chair of Solitude and make them into a Jarl. There are many Thanes in Solitude aside from Thane Bryling, but they had little authority, power, and popularity compared to her. They were like some court jesters in the time of Torrig who would come to be useful once or twice in their lives. As for the one that matters, Thane Bryling was currently leading the investigation of what happened in the castle. I said you can't stop me from investigating further. Rika, this is my duty to see through. Thane Bryling shouted at a Legion legate. As a legate of the Legion, I am under strict orders to keep outsiders from interfering in the castle affairs during drills. But as your friend, there's really nothing I can do. Legate Rika replied, This is unacceptable. Our Jarl died by the blades of the assassins who completely infiltrated your castle. Your castle was simply nothing in front of them, and you still speak of the Legion's abilities? Well, it's all clear now that you can't deal with anything. I am sorry, Bryling, but until the situation is resolved, the castle will be sealed under secret drills. Legate Rika said and retreated back behind the castle gate. Just a few minutes ago, Thane Bryling received news that an order came from General Tullius to move all non-legionnaire military personnel off the premises of Castle Dower and seal all the ins and outs, except for the Temple of the Divines, which will be heavily guarded 24/7. It is safe to say that Castle Dower was originally the barracks of the guards, as well as the place where the Imperial garrison stays. Now that the guards were officially kicked from their own barracks, the situation was nothing less than scandalous. General Tullius was wiping the ground with the entire court of Skyrim to show how powerless they are, and even when Thane Bryling tried to intervene and return with them under the guise of investigating, the Legion started some sort of a drill to keep outsiders at bay. Moreover, it seemed that many guards of the city were being reeled into the Legion, and many guard posts were taken over by legionaries. The unrest among the guards only grew more and more as their city was being slowly devoured and taken over by the Legion and turning into a full Imperial city rather than a Nord one. Do we look like some pushovers to you? Bryling shouted at the castle's gate, but no one even responded to her. Her rage almost reached the sky, but there was little she could do in her hands, and no Jarl to support her back. Still, that was far from over to her. Captain Aldous, she called, and a bearded man wearing a guard's armor approached her with soulless eyes and a sad face. Yes, my lady. How many men do you have, and what post do you still hold? She asked. As for the men, it is a little over 300 compared to the Imperial garrison of 1,000. As for the posts, we have the Blue Palace all the way to the castle gate. We hold the market still, and we have some presence in the residential areas. He replied, Ignore the inner security of the palace, since there's nothing to guard there no more. Focus on the streets. Push from the market all the way to the city gate as much as you can. Don't let the Imperial patrols order your men around ever again. Do that with only 150 men. She ordered him. It won't be an easy task, and we have the other 150 as the night shift. Captain Aldous replied. No. Bryling shook her head. 150 are both the day and the night shifts. What? Captain Aldous looked at Bryling with questioning eyes, as he couldn't think of a possible way to make her demands possible. The other 150 will be spread over in the dockyard and the shanty town outside the city. Bryling said, But that is impossible, my lady. Captain Aldous spoke in a shaken tone. The dockyard has been under the Legion influence even before the incident. Just do it. The offense is the best defense, and as long as we press over the security of the dockyard, the Legion won't be able to take an extra step towards the Blue Palace. She said, "It seems that Thane Bryling is willing to go head-to-head against the Legion and their general no matter the consequences. The insolence of being led around by a military governor from Cyrodiil can't be accepted anymore. One last thing, my lady." Captain Aldous spoke about the guards' pay and barracks location. "As for the pay, the Blue Palace can still pay without a problem. As for the barracks," she paused a little before continuing, "my house will do. Go to my house, Garl, and transform my house into a barracks." Sacrificing her house for the cause. That was exactly something Bryling would do, and part of the reason why she is the most admired lawkeeper of this city. And as she started to take action and fortify the authority of the palace, the guards started to admire her and fall in line even more than before. Even rumors have started to spread between the populace of Solitude about the sudden power struggle, and all the Nords with a large majority of the non-Nords were all supporting Thane Bryling heart and soul. The guards moved by the commands of Captain Aldous and started to take their first step into retaking their city. Seeing you preach against the Legion, one would mistake you for a Stormcloak, my lady." A voice came from where she wasn't looking. Bryling turned to see who spoke such treacherous words, only to meet John Dare's most frequent envoy, John Dare himself. He came over followed by Falk Firebeard and Sybil Stentor, along with some key figures of the hold. "Even if it is you, my lord, these are no words you can joke around with." Bryling spoke back to John with zero chills. All right, my bad." He raised his hands as he approached and stood with her and all those who followed him under the shade of the castle. "Very vexing, isn't it?" he asked, the longtime ally turning to be like this. "I don't believe in such a thing as alliance." Thane Bryling replied, "The powers of the world are always looking for ways to exploit each other, and as of this moment, we have fallen out of grace. The only thing to believe in is honor, and some are born free of it." Her words were causing ruckus the more she spoke, but that was part of her charm. Speaking those words at the hearing of the Imperial Legion needed a lot of guts, and she had all the guts a human can have. "My lady," Falk Firebeard spoke before all the people gathered. "While we were all wailing in our homes over the milk that was spilled, you were out here all this time interrogating the assailants and looking for the truth of what happened. You gave yourself no time to grief and barely ate while carrying on everything you can do." "Falk," Bryling interrupted him. "Why are you speaking like that? It is my duty, as you know." She paused a little before looking at everyone around her and feeling that something was staged. Looking at John Dare, who was smiling ear to ear, she knew this famous stage master is doing something here. "My lady," Sybil Stentor stood beside Falk. "Nord I may not be, but I've taken my home in this city many years ago, and so I believe I can speak for your honor in the stead of those who know your honor and valor. Not only them, but all the people standing behind them from the Lesser Thanes, and the influential figures agreed with both Falk and Sybil in a heartbeat. We all agree to nominate you as the new Jarl of Solitude." Falk spoke those words that Bryling feared the most. "That's impossible," Bryling replied. "No matter who nominates who, the final say over this matter must come from." Bryling paused and looked behind her. "The only one who can nominate a Jarl is the Emperor, and the ones who practically make the list of nominees are the Imperial Authority of Skyrim, the one that is antagonizing them now. From this list, the Council of Thanes chooses a new Jarl, so long there is no direct heir for the previous Jarl. But this time, the people were choosing, and she is the choice. Not the Empire, but the people." Bryling realized the meaning of such words, and to her, it embodied everything important she believed in. But the Jarl's seat, it still held a big meaning. "We know of no one who can lead us at this moment except for you, Lady Bryling. You have every hour of my waking and resting at your service." Falk pledged. "Despite our personal differences, the duty which you upheld up until now is what kept this city together. You have my counsel and magic at your service." Sybil pledged. One after another, the lords and ladies of Solitude pledged loyalty to Bryling as the new Thane despite the clear imperial discrimination towards the members of the Solitude's court. And I, John Hild Firemane, known to you as John Dare, a friend of Solitude and a fellow Nord, witnessed the loyalty and allegiance pledged by everyone who is present in this place to Lady Bryling, and would personally carry your words by my fastest caravans to the imperial city and present a legal notice to the Elder Council. John said those words as an ally of Solitude. He then cleared his voice and took in a strong breath of air that made the air around Solitude become unsettled. The words he spoke next echoed in the city, not too loudly and not too softly, but were heard by all. On behalf of the court of the Blue Palace, we plead to those who witnessed this event from the loftiest among us and the respected commoners to go and pay their sincerity to the Blue Palace by pledging their allegiance. A scribe shall stand on its gate and receive your names that will be sent with the official document which nominates Thane Bryling to the position of Jarl. Those who fit are the citizens of Hafengar from all castes of society, so long they have come of age and are fit for military service. May the blessings of the Wolf Banner be with you all. The words which John spoke in the name of the Blue Palace Court became very unsettling and disturbed the advantage held by the imperial authority. Castle Dower was working like clockwork in order to negate the effects that the announcement had, but more news flowed in. John Dare was supporting the Blue Palace and advocating for Thane Bryling as the new Jarl. The Dare Dragon Company will carry an official notice to the Imperial Council with the name of every citizen that supports Bryling as the new Jarl, and it is packed with names just from the first hour of activity. Thane Bryling donated her house to be the new barracks of the guards, and the guard of the city are increasing their presence around the positions they were locked away from by the Legion. The Blue Palace Court used the opportunity of the vote held in front of the palace to recruit around 200 new guards. A fortified carriage started moving from a place within the residential area carrying gold and silver all the way to the Blue Palace in order to replenish its coffers. And all the previous events happened in the span of 2 hours. Even while disadvantaged, the hidden currents of Solitude were moved by a series of secret visits from Falk and Sybil to all the influential faces in the city, and by using the name of Thane Bryling as a face and the name of John Dare as a backer. They reeled in a lot of support way too fast. The strategic center of the Legion, which was hatching a plan for the next month in order to seize control over the city, lost everything in those 2 hours by the momentum which was displayed by the Nords and their neighbors. But the most disturbing piece of news was what follows. At the gate of the Blue Palace, the Housecarls handed the Wolf Banner of Solitude to Thane Bryling and gifted to her a shawl made of the hide of a gray wolf. Those who saw Lady Bryling while wearing this shawl pledged their loyalty again and called themselves the Grey Wolf Movement, a political movement that aims for the liberty of the people and upholds the honorable Nordic traditions. Their first accomplishment is the notice that carries the will of the people to the highest court in the world with no mediation or fear. The situation of this morning was flipped immediately as the Blue Palace closed its gates when the Imperial Authority of Skyrim sent an envoy to discuss the incident that was caused in order to lessen the severity of the situation. The action was met with an absolute disdain from the people of Solitude. And so it all worked out. John raised his cup to the other three in the room, Lady Bryling, Falk Firebeard, and Sybil Stentor. By throwing me under the wagon. Bryling smiled and drank her cup. No one is throwing anyone under anything, John said. The Imperial Legion just attempted a takeover. They used you the moment you were the weakest and just kept kicking. Things may get violent, Bryling replied. Their loss, John replied back. Remember that we skipped them and sent our demands to the Elder Council directly. But the Emperor won't just let us have an easy way with the Legion. Fox said, the Emperor will do nothing. By the time it arrives, the Emperor will start moving towards Skyrim, and the Elder Council will be the one in charge. Imagine the discord that exists between the Council and the Legion. By the time it arrives, The Elder Council will gladly suppress the Legion from gaining a firm stronghold away from the Imperial City and will foil their attempt through Jarl Breiling. I still hate the sound of it, Breiling said. Hate it or love it, the duty that comes with it requires someone of your caliber. Right now, you need to fill your time with service to the hold and garner a lot of popularity to keep the people on your side. John said, What do you suggest I do? Fuck asked. Dragonbridge was asking for help the last day we were here with Jarl Elisif, Heaven's Keeper Soul. I promised her to help the people of Dragonbridge, but it would be a grand feat that the future Jarl herself come for the help. John said, I understand the situation, but I still find it distasteful to use the people's trouble for my gain. Breiling said, Think of it like this. Your gain is their gain. John replied, True. Fuck agreed with him. Either way, I sincerely thank you, Lord John, for your assistance to the court in our time of need. You have proven your honor, and once we can stand properly against the Empire, we will work on repaying you. Breiling said as she shook hands with John, Such a thing isn't necessary. I don't care so much about honor or whatnot, but I thank you still. John replied, You don't care for honor? Aren't you the man who called his own staff pride? Breiling asked jokingly. I like to say that as I wield my pride, I control it rather than it controlling me. John replied, Indeed, the more of our flaws we control, the better we grow. Breiling agreed with him. What else do you control rather than being controlled with? The question was deep, but it was still curious, and it made John smile. I control my greed, wrath, pride, lust, and gluttony, John said, but very soon I will control envy. Also consider commenting and joining Discord all on this URL, https://linktr.ee/Donovel. Join us on Patter 0N for extra. Chapter 631, Nordic Hustle. Collision small teaser. Envy has been created on Chapter 644 Collision. So he decided to work openly against us. I am sorry, sir, but we may have acted way too soon. Are you doubting my leadership, Legate? Of course not, sir. I was only saying that we antagonized the court members way too hastily. We can't wait. The winter funds have almost run out, and the lowered taxes have harmed us more. The Stormcloaks are getting provisions from God knows where, and you expect me to not seize an opportunity to feed the Legion? The General and the Legate had their usual argument this day as well. As a Nord, Legate Rika tried to ask General Tullius to be lenient when dealing with the Court of Solitude while he insisted that seizing the opportunity would be best for the Legion's provisions issue. He aimed to secure the Legion enough political power to be able to receive more funds from the Nords for the war efforts. The number of Legion soldiers under his command may have been doubled thanks to the relentless recruiting campaign he established, but the numbers became his problem. On the other hand, the politicians of Cyrodiil may have limited the winter funds of the Legion so that it doesn't have too much power than needed. While the Legion is fighting against the Stormcloaks, they have to beg for money from the local lords and scrap whichever they can so they make ends meet. This may prevent the Legion from overstepping its power, but will also cripple it to some extent. Somehow, that limiter balanced the power which the Legion had, but its commander, General Tullius, wanted to use this chance and remove that limiter. He had John to blame for the fall of his plan, but there's no way he would deal with John anyway. At first, the General attempted to provoke John by trying to snatch his monopoly contract, which failed. Then he tried to reel in the Dragonborn by the Lord's mail armor, which also failed. So now John is foiling his attempt to take over Solitude. Just how to deal with that annoying man. General Tullius, sir. At that moment, a soldier rushed into the meeting room. Report. The General responded. 2 reports came just now, one from the Blue Palace and one from the city gate. The soldier said, the watchers stationed around the palace report that Thane Breiling, along with a small force of guards, and John Dare were seen heading on horsebacks and going out of town. The city gate sentries report the arrival of Thane Brina Marilis. Finally, she arrived. The General became relieved at last. General, wait. Legate Rika ran after General Tullius as he walked ahead. Brina Marilis? The former legionary? She was the candidate we're after all along? That's right, the general replied as he looked back. But this is the first time I hear of this. Rika said, I've kept it from everyone. I didn't want a certain John Dare to find out somehow and foil the plan. I also sent a formal notice to the Elder Council to assign Thane Berna of the Pale as a temporary Jarl to Hafingar until we find an excuse to keep her. The general was planning all along and had his secret game happening in the shadows without the involvement of his right hand, Legate Rika. This means he suspects a mole under his command, a mole that is most likely a Nord. It felt like an insult, but one the general didn't speak and thus wasn't accountable for. Of course, he can't tell his legate everything he does, as strategic plans require a certain level of secrecy. But that is no strategic field since the general is personally dabbling into politics. But Thane Berna isn't from Solitude or even Hafingar to begin with. She's from Dawnstar. Legate Rika spoke following the general down the stairs. And the general asked, the people here won't accept a Jarl they have never heard of. Rika said, as I said, the position will be temporary until they start seeing her as one of them. Don't you Nords bond too fast? The general replied, no, many won't let it just slide. Legate Rika understood what General Tullius wanted from the start and gnashed her teeth. First, he would force his own Jarl on the Court of Solitude to divide and conquer them. Second, since the new Jarl was someone who served in the Imperial Legion, she will easily submit to the higher authority of a general. Third, the Legion will have access to all the funds it needs from Solitude's treasury aside from the war tax it receives. Fourth, and as the most vital thing, Thane Brina Marilis isn't a big fan of Thane John Dare. The last reason was certainly something very important in order to push John Dare's influence out of Solitude. During his rise to power, John Dare's first enemy was neither the pirates he eradicated nor the bandits he hunted to extinction. The first enemy he made was his neighbor, the city of Dawnstar. Dawnstar was known to be a dock for all the ships that trade in the Sea of Ghosts, and while it was modest, it was working just fine since the coast of Dawnstar was clear of any rocks and always provided service. But Winterhold became the jewel of the North overnight. It overshadowed Dawnstar almost completely as John Dare constructed his docks and his ships. He even cleared the water with his own hands and magic as he secured safe ways for the ships to pass by and witness the marvels of the reborn Nordic city. Meanwhile, Dawnstar suffered a setback after another and lost its prestigious spot when John made contacts with both the great houses of Morrowind and the East Empire Trading Company. All the focus was on him, and he delivered an excellent service beyond what is expected. Dawnstar and the entire Pale had a rising amount of unemployment, and many of the populace migrated east. There was also that accident when Jarl, Skald the Elder of Dawnstar, took a family member of one of John's friends as a hostage in order to vex them and got his city raided and his longhouse burnt in an old-school Nord raid. Thane Brina Marilis wasn't a fan of Jarl Skald the Elder and his Stormcloak tendencies, and even posed as opposition for his childish actions, but she was nonetheless a member of Dawnstar and felt insulted by John Dare many times over his annoyance with Jarl Skald. Setting her up against him is a good move for the Legion. And there they all gathered down at the city gate. Thane John Dare of Winterhold and Whiterun, Thane Breiling of Hafingar, Thane Brina Marilis of the Pale, and following them was General Tullius of the Imperial Legion, military governor of Skyrim, and commander of the Northern Imperial Legion. Rika felt like her head was about to hurt so badly. John's mount was a large flame horse Atronak that looked both majestic and devilish, as he seemed to have lent Breiling a similar one, compared to Thane Brina and General Tullius, whose mounts were ordinary horses that seemed agitated from their Daedra counterparts. "General," John called, "I believe this is our first time meeting in an official ceremony." "Thane John." The general returned the greeting half-heartedly and refused to shake hands with John. "I see we're blocking the road of Thane Brina. Excuse my poor manners," John said. "It is nothing, Thane John." Brina Marilis passed John and Thane Bryling to stand by the general. "Come on, Thane Brina. We're all friends here. No need for such stiffness." John laughed loudly and acted all friendly before looking between the general and Thane Brina. "You two do your own thing. We'll catch up later over some mead since I'm running out of time." John Dare seemed to be eyeing what the two were up to as he smiled and rode ahead past the gate. Thane Bryling rode after him in a composed manner. "My lady, I am sorry for your loss." Thane Brina spoke to Thane Bryling. "Thank you for your sincerity, my lady," Bryling replied. "I do wish to pay my respect to our former High King and Queen." Brina said, "I won't be escorting you sadly, my lady. If you excuse me, I have my duties to attend to," Bryling said and ignored both Brina and the general. Following Bryling, there were over 20 armed guards who seemed to be prepared for a raid or something, as well as a priest riding a horse and carrying an ornate tray that has a war horn and a circlet accessory. "What is that?" General Tullius asked. "That is an offering for the dead." Both Legate Rika and Thane Brina replied before looking at each other and greeting the other politely. "Is it another Nord tradition? Where are they taking it?" the general asked. "To an altar. If the offering wasn't taken to any of the 8 divines, it is probably being taken to the 9th. The horn belonged to High King Torig and the circlet to Jarl Elisif. They are offering it to Talos? Don't they fear that we may pursue and arrest them?" the general asked. John Dare is not one to shy or hide whatever unreasonable acts he does, Brina Marilis said. Before the Stormcloak Rebellion, he was known to be hunting official Thalmor Justiciar publicly. Now that he is casting his flaming steeds in the city, he won't shy from wiping out an attachment of Imperial soldiers. So, becoming a criminal isn't something he minds? The general spoke in an imposed manner. "There won't be evidence to hold him accountable, General. He makes sure that even the corpses turn to dust that is scattered with the wind to oblivion. He also performs the rites of soul trapping on the people that have great animosity towards him in order to prevent them from returning as undead and haunting his northern paradise," Brina Marilis said as she kept staring at John Dare. "He may give you the illusion that he is playing by the rules, but the moment you believe that, he would have already cheated, doubled down on his bets, drained everyone else's money, and hogged all the pot for himself. When men acquire too much power," the general sighed. "As I said, he would give you the illusion of playing a politician just to let his other plans pass by. I accepted your offer for the reasons you have told me, General, but if this turns into a losing game, I am afraid the consequences will be severe," Brina said. "We know his aim, Lady Brina. His means may be radical, but we only have to wait for the Elder Council to approve your Jarl title. John Dare is going to send a caravan to Cyrodiil, but what he doesn't know is that we have already sent ours an hour after the death of Jarl Elisif. We also won't let his caravan just pass quietly," the general replied. "I see you have prepared," Brina said, "but not enough." "What do you mean?" the general frowned. "You are making this whole situation about John Dare, if you haven't noticed. He's a con man, so he is making you focus on something rather than his actual goal, General. You never really know what trick the magician will play next." "So, what is a trick?" General Tullius asked. "If it is only one," Brina laughed and pointed towards the castle gate. There, a caravan was seen entering the city bearing the black and red banner of the Dare Dragon Trading Company. It was timed with the announcement that a caravan will come to bear the will of the people to the Emperor, and so this is the target. At the end of the caravan, John Dare stopped with his Atronak horse, and another person met him. That other person was clearly a woman, and she exchanged an obvious smooch in the middle of the road with John. As she turned, General Tullius recognized the woman and felt uncomfortable. "As I said, you don't know the magician's next trick," Brina said. Now he pushes his beautiful assistant to the stage just to distract everyone. Seeing Alina Dare, who was leading the caravan, General Tullius was worried about what game was happening, but also pleased that the person he selected to assist him was an expert in the tricks of John Dare. This time, it won't end like the incident of the Dare Dragon Company's exclusive contract over Winterhold resources, which ended in a disaster, and the incident over contacting the Dragonborn. John's caravan that was heading to the Imperial City is here in solitude, and it will be easy to track. Let's go and make some plans. The general turned with his horse and hurried back to his castle, with Thane Brina and Legate Rika following behind. The game was afoot, and everyone was ready to hog the big sweet roll known as the Hold of Hafengar. Little did they all know of a crisis approaching with the dark skies. Chapter 632, Mount Kilcreath. I haven't made it clear before, but Jarl Elisif's death was actually cut content from Skyrim. The Dater quest of Bothia was originally made so that the player assassinates Jarl Elisif, but it was changed for some reason. If you kill Elisif with console commands, there's a unique line that the Stormcloak soldiers will say that even the nobility of Oblivion are on their side. Personally, I see that Elisif was a bad leader altogether despite the sentiment towards her. Many of you suggested that John would crawl in her bed and add her to the harem, but that would be an insult to his friend, King Torrig. Killing her in that way will guarantee her to go to Sovngarde since all Nords who get killed go there. I know it is supposed to be a battle, but the game counts them as honored dead if you have the Afterlife mod. If you take a look at real-world politics, you'd know that Elisif was surely lucky to survive this long. By the skin of our teeth, we made it, Viezra said as he dragged his tired body off his horse. Scales in your case, Serana replied nonchalantly. Very funny, vampire girl, he replied with a fake laugh. You're welcome, reptile, she said as an insult. The Argonian and the vampire made it back to the hideout of the Dark Brotherhood 3 days later after the operation of killing Vittoria Vici. They had to run in circles and diverge their path many times in order to shake off their chasers and return home. You've been avoiding my questions those past 3 days. Serana spoke. You think it is the right time to ask questions? Viezra asked. We're home at last. Serana stated the obvious. At least let my mortal body rest first. You undying freak. Viezra insulted the apathetic vampire and took his gear off his horse. Eventually, all mortals shall rest. Bah, tell me about that woman. Serana seemed to have been asking questions endlessly about the woman that interrupted their escape in Castledour, the Dunmare with such a strong, killing intent, Jelinar. Viezra sighed and walked off. Imagine raising a child as an assassin, perfect in every way, then some fool with brainwashing ideologies and an endless amount of money comes and reaps the benefit. That tells you enough, vampire? He said without looking back. So, she was your prospect? You trained and raised her? Serana asked. She has the willingness to kill. All I had to do was to push it further. Her mother was dying, then just hasten that process, make the girl full of anger, and you have the perfect murderous child recipe. Cruelty breeds cruelty. Viezra bragged about his methods. Then, Serana asked more. Then put a knife in her hand and tell her to kill. How hard was that? If not for her falling into his hands, she would have turned just perfect, but he brainwashed her to no return. How can a woman that's strong be brainwashed? How can she not? She changed her name for him, kills in his name, wakes and sleeps in his name. She even worships him like some sort of a lunatic. Viezra shouted. I see. Quite unfortunate for you losing a prospect like that. Serana said, and became no longer interested in what Viezra had to say. She never had the pleasure to meet any of John's entourage other than Jelinar, and she left quite the impression. If John, who is already this powerful, has a powerful lackey such as Jelinar, it would mean that not only Serana was weak, but totally outnumbered and outgunned against John's level. She held him at the level she needs to at least reach in order to face her father, who is the strongest existence she knows of. Either way, this is the first of the remaining targets, Serana said, and walked ahead of Viezra. Astrid gave you more targets. Viezra asked. 2 more, Serana replied, and reached the black door to enter the sanctuary report to Astrid. As the two went in and descended the stairway, they were met with Astrid and Nazir. You two are back. Astrid jumped off her chair as she was anxiously waiting. What's wrong? Both Serana and Viezra asked reflexively. Wrong? Apart from everything, what's right? Nazir scolded them. As you two were taking your time arriving here, the world was turning upside down. Serana had a bad feeling and didn't reply to know more about the situation. Your orders were to kill Vittoria Vici. Astrid said, Now I know you all are good assassins and everything, but why did you have to go out of your way and murder the Jarl of Solitude? Murder who? Serana asked as she didn't believe what she heard. We didn't. Even Viezra refuted immediately. Don't play dumb on me, Astrid shouted. Astrid. Viezra had to raise his voice. We really didn't. The look on Astrid's face was that of pure anger, but she had to calm down and turn the other way. On the other hand, Nazir carried a piece of paper to both Serana and Viezra. They have posters of your faces spread all around Imperial holds. He threw a stack of paper at them, which spread around them as they fell down. Interesting. Viezra frowned as he caught a paper in front of his face. Meanwhile, Serana felt that she went through a terrible shock and would have gone paler if she wasn't a vampire. The fact that her face was put on a wanted poster only meant that the other vampires of the Fokihar clan are going to pick up on her trail very soon. However, what is that? Viezra spoke in agitation. What's wrong? Nazir asked. They got my face completely right, but her face. Viezra raised the paper, and Serana managed to see her face on the poster for the first time. She wanted to say something, but her emotions, which were running wild just now, exhausted her brain. You're right. I noticed it too, but they didn't get her right at all. Nazir agreed with Viezra. You were there with us. Why didn't your face get reported? Viezra asked. Unlike you, my dear Argonian friend, my charming face leaves no witnesses alive. Nazir joked around, but no one laughed at his joke, so he awkwardly toned it down. On the other hand, Serana managed to calm down at last. Her face was seen only by Jelinar, who is one of John's people. The fact that Viezra's face was accurately reported while hers was completely wrong meant something very obvious. John Dare is sending her a message that he still has her back. It is annoying to be supervised by him, but getting her face revealed this soon is just problematic. For that, she calmed down and participated in the conversation. Unlike you, Nazir, we survived our witness only by the care of Sidis. She said, still, we were too busy running away rather than chasing the Jarl of Solitude of all people. So you're saying that we're being framed? Astrid asked. With all due respect, we're in bed with a member of the Imperial Council in this contact. It means that they will have their own turns to play while we play, and they can just hide their cards in ours. Serana spoke out her insight. Indeed, Nazir agreed, and Viezra nodded. I guess you were right. Astrid found no other way other than to agree with Serana at this point. We should change our approach to the remaining 2 targets before the big job. Who's the next target? Viezra asked. You'll have to remove yourself from the next few jobs, since your face is known. Astrid said. Nords can't tell us Argonians apart, you know. Viezra protested. Exactly. A lot of your folk will be hunted, so I am not risking you. Astrid said, Nazir, I'll need you to manage things around here while I am away to bring some funds. As for Serana, your face is completely mistaken on the posters, so we will use this in our good luck. All right, Serana nodded. With Vici's murder, you've started us down a path the Dark Brotherhood hasn't traveled in centuries. The assassination of an emperor. And now, your reward. A unique spell to summon a legend of the Dark Brotherhood. His soul serves us now in death, as his body once did in life. And of course, a bonus for killing Vici while she addressed her guests, as instructed. Gold, simple and pure. Spend it as you will, and not all in one place. Now then, time to proceed to the next stage of the plan. Go and speak with Gabriella. She's been helping me arrange your next contract. Astrid said. Any details I need to hear before going? Serana asked. The Emperor's arrival in Skyrim is now a certainty, since he can ignore his cousin's wedding, but not her funeral. The Imperial Legion will need to begin its preparations immediately. Security is being handled by a man named Gaius Maro. His job is to travel throughout Skyrim and ensure each city is prepared for the Emperor's visit. You must find and kill him. Doing so will disrupt security sufficiently that we will be able to eventually get to the Emperor. Isn't it dangerous to target such a man who oversees the visit? The Emperor won't come if his planner is slaughtered, right? Serana asked. That's why I took the liberty of visiting the cities and spreading some nasty rumors about the head of the Emperor's security, Commander Morrow, to make his treachery that much more believable. Astrid explained. Serana thought for a few seconds and nodded. I see, she said. I'll speak to Gabriella. Serana headed in to speak with Gabriella, and the two started discussing the plan. The head of the Emperor's security, Commander Morrow, had to be crippled somehow, thus killing his son, Gaius Morrow, and planting incriminating evidence on his body is the best way to ensure the man's destruction. The best evidence is by attributing the plot of killing the Emperor to Gaius Morrow. Aside from disturbing the Emperor's security detail, this will give the Emperor a false sense of security since the supposed assassination has already failed. Serana took this information back to her room in the sanctuary and started to plan her actions. In order to know where her target is, she must steal the traveling schedule of Gaius Morrow, which is located in Dragonbridge. Still, something was very disturbing happening in her room. On her small wooden table, there was a journal with a cover made of sheepskin. Attached to it was a note, and on it was a very disturbing line. I took the liberty of visiting the Penitus Oculatus outpost and took out Gaius Morrow's schedule with me as a gift to you, cute little fangs. Just thinking that this man can breach the entire security of the Dark Brotherhood and deliver her a letter in the deepest part of the sanctuary. The thought was just provoking. P.S. Don't mind the black cat fur. Actually, you may consider it a blessing. Black fur. Serana looked around, and on her bed, there was a black cat peacefully taking a nap. The security of the Dark Brotherhood. That's certainly considered a joke to some people. Away from all the drama in the universe, Sir John Dare and Lady Bryling traveled through Hafingar's mountains along with 20 guards. It is mighty exciting to be a travel planner for the first time, my lady. John spoke. A man with your fame must have traveled a lot, my lord. The 2 years in exile must have been filled with adventures. Bryling replied. So, you have heard of my endeavors? He asked. All of Skyrim found out when you became the grand champion of the Imperial Arena, defeating the previous champion Darius in an epic battle. Bryling replied. Yes. Those were the days I spent on the road. My friend Vittoria Vici received me that day in the Imperial City in a grandiose gala. John said, Heavens bless her soul. She will be missed. Bryling said, She will. How hard it is finding kindred souls in this world. John said in a saddened tone, All right, we're almost there. That is Mount Kilcreath. Bryling noted, Yes, the mountain where the old shrine of Meridia lies. John said, You know your Daedra, my lord. Bryling said, Well, for a guy who came from Winterhold, I walk outside my balcony every morning and see the fascinating shrine of Azura towering over my lands. I might have grown a bit used to the Daedra. John laughed. Dangerous words. Bryling smiled as she said so. Either way, there's a shrine of Meridia up there, my lady. The main shrine of the Daedra in Skyrim. We go up there and... John started explaining his plan. My lord, Bryling interrupted him. I know your plan was to pile up achievements, but I thought this has to do with the situation of Dragonbridge Village. True. That's why we have to come here first before seeing the situation of Dragonbridge. John nodded. In this shrine, there is something we need to pick up first. I'm just not sure dealing with the Daedra is the best achievement we can accomplish at this moment. Bryling expressed her worries as a normal person who would go to far lengths in order to avoid the princes of Oblivion. Don't worry. Meridia and I go way back. John eased her worries casually, but then looked back at her. Just mind your eardrums. The group reached the entrance of a shrine, and John led them on top of it in order to find the statue of Meridia, Daedric Prince of Infinite Energies. The statue was that of a woman dressed in large robes that moved around her to form what can be seen as two wings. She raised her arms above her head, and an aura of white energy gathered atop of it. "What are we doing here?" asked Bryling. John started searching his storage cube and retrieved an item that he kept hovering above his hand. "Hold this, please," he said. "That is a gemstone, very pure as you see." Bryling hesitated a bit before taking the gem from John. It was a white gem of a strange rough shape, yet it had a very pure luster to it. Bryling wasn't particularly impressed by it, but she felt that such a big gem is by no means ordinary. At that moment, her expressions turned strange and started sweating amid this snowy day as if it was midsummer. After a short while, the look on her face became natural. "Good." John nodded and took the beacon of Meridia towards the pedestal in front of the statue, then placed it there. And up we go. At that moment, both John and Thane Bryling felt that the level of their vision had reached the sky, and a powerful voice spoke to them. After a long time of acquiring the beacon of Meridia, John has finally decided to challenge the Daedric quest of Meridia to acquire a very powerful weapon. Chapter 633, Break of Dawn. Sitting around a campfire at the side of the road, John and Bryling sat together and started studying a map of the old shrine of Meridia. "I say we should take this way." "What? This way? We should take it." "Speak up. We go this way." "All right." "Goodness, I think I made her deaf." It was John and Bryling who had to meet the Daedra Meridia upon the arrival to Mount Kilcreath, and John played a prank on Bryling to let her hear the deafening voice of Meridia. So much for a prank it was. Bryling and even John himself were badly deafened after the encounter with the Daedric prince. Meridia elevated the senses of both John and Bryling above the clouds and spoke to them through an aura of light. She then gave them the command to cleanse her shrine of the undead infestation and the necromancer responsible. Bryling signed up immediately after knowing that there's a necromancer this close to the city and stated that she respects Meridia for her hate towards undeath and necromancy, but her true heart is with Akatosh, something that Meridia didn't bother with. John also promised Meridia aid and alliance, as they have many mutual enemies. This agreement with the Daedra led to the small side campaign in the shrine in order to cleanse it from the undead. "So, you said you have the same enemies as a Daedric lord?" Bryling asked. "Yes," John replied. Bryling furrowed her brows as she didn't hear him well. John let out a sigh and pointed his staff near her head before channeling a fast healing spell. "I hope you can hear better now," he said. Barely. The world is still ringing." Bryling said. "As you say, I share a few enemies with Prince Meridia. Aside from necromancers and vampires, I have a big grudge with Molag Bal. I remember fucking Clavicus Val once. I had a falling out with Maroon's Dagon. Hermias Mora supports a rival of mine, and I can't stand either Malakath or Periite." "Goodness," Bryling frowned. "You have an entire pantheon of enemies." "True," John nodded. "There's also the Worm God, but nobody likes Mannimarco either way." "Who are your allies, then?" Bryling asked. "I have the support of Azura, Bothia, and Mephala, even though one wouldn't rely on those deceitful three for anything good. Still, a good portion of their worshippers live under my protection, and I allow them to worship freely and openly within the limits of law. Shiagrath is a longtime ally, and somehow he feels like an uncle to me. Person is also treating me well, and hopefully Meridia joins the party." "That's 6 enemies and 6 friendlies." "Indeed. The remaining 4 are the ones neutral to me so far. Namara and Vermina are too much even for me, so I tend to avoid them even though my wife has managed to be on good terms with Vermina. Nocturnal is also one I need to forge an alliance with, and lastly Sanguine invited me to a realm party once." "A realm party?" "The biggest philanderer in Oblivion and the biggest philanderer on Nirn. It surely was a party." Bryling looked away from John and stared back into the campfire. "So, what are we supposed to gain from this?" Bryling asked. Aside from knowing that a neighboring necromancer is dealt with, there is also a good artifact lying around somewhere. John said. What's it about? She asked, smiting the undead back to oblivion. He replied, the fact that you want this means that the main thing we are after is also undead. Bryling concluded, you're a sharp woman, Lady Bryling. You'll make a good Jarl. John confirmed her thoughts and retreated to his small tent. But the guards we brought are too few for such a thing. Our entire party will be in danger, if anything. She started worrying, but John interrupted her. The 20 guards we brought along aren't here to fight, he said. Then, are you okay with them being put to danger down here? Bryling asked with a stern face. Relax, John smiled. All we need are 20 witnesses. Witnesses? Sure. Someone who witnesses how awesome the future Jarl is. You'll be doing all the fighting in case you didn't notice. I'll be protecting them from the sidelines while you spearhead. And you're just telling me that. Bryling seemed disturbed. If I am to serve my hold, I don't need witnesses or words of thanks and glory. Goodness, John sighed. It's just some propaganda. Just leave it to me and focus on solving problems. Getting in terms with someone as lawful as Bryling is a pain in the ass, but John can't go back now, especially after killing Jarl Lissif. If he doesn't appoint a strong ally in Solitude, he would lose a lot of connections, especially after the supposed death of Vittoria Vici. The plan had to succeed. Getting into the temple was one thing, getting through it was another. Meridia's temple was built hundreds of years ago, and the undead attacked it many times before, thus it is an easy stronghold to defend. What John did was to imbue Thane Bryling with a lot of magical energy that her mace was shimmering with sun energy, an effect deadly for the undead. The guards following her were ordered into 2 formations and took the flanks. John took the rear and sent many Atronax and familiars to assist Bryling in the front. Against such force, the temple was breached easily, but the sight of the undead creeped out the simple city guards who couldn't handle their appearance. Walking skeletons is one thing, but the things that guarded the Temple of Meridia were corrupted shades, incarnations of dead war soldiers that wandered by mistake into this temple and got caught by the necromancer. Some of them were Imperial legionaries, some were hold guards, some were stormcloaks. What was more horrific was the fact that many corpses of those soldiers were lying around almost everywhere. The corrupted shades themselves were not walking dead, but more like ghosts, beings enshrouded in shadow energy that felt dark and empty as they floated around and wailed, as if they were expecting the moment of their death over and over. Don't fear the dead, brave men. Those are war martyrs, people who fought on both sides and departed valiantly. However, the necromancer sent his minions and broke their souls from their corpses in order to make them into his minions as well. The Nords among them didn't get to go to Sovngarde, but rather to the dreadful pits of oblivion. By putting down the shades, you free your brethren and send them safe to Sovngarde. Rejoice, brothers, for today you are the messengers of Kine and the warriors of Shore. John had to boost morale and speak powerful words in order to indoctrinate the narrative he wants to be spread into the minds of those guards. If 20 guards return to Solitude and spread the rumors, things will go very well in Bryling's favor. But he went lengths beyond that. He personally made the guards witness how the light of Meridia comes and travels through her temple and how it must be channeled in order to protect Hafengar from the undead hordes. By doing that, he displayed his arcane craft and his work for the betterment of the people through any means possible. That said and done, the party delved to the deepest of the temple's inner sanctum and confronted the necromancer, who fortified the last chamber with a large number of undead. There, John had to take the lead. Necromancer Malkaron, we know you're holding there. You have committed crimes against Skyrim and her people. What say you in your defense? John shouted outside the room. The hold guards following him looked at each other with signs of amazement at how clean that line came out. You dirty bastards. You can't leave a man to his work when he is bothering nobody. From inside, the Breton necromancer Malkaron spoke. Oomph. You worm cult bastard. You think I don't know what you are? John said, You're one of those worm cult executives who worship that worm demon Mannimarco. Damn you. Don't you insult my lord. The necromancer seemed frustrated when John said what he said. Huh. You worm bastards were almost wiped out in Hammerfell by the citadel of Ebenarm at Hagoth. I was there, and I witnessed the massacre, John said as he enjoyed taunting the necromancer out. Bastard, I'll kill you personally. The necromancer was enraged, but still held his anger to not make a mistake against those who cleared out his stronghold in a few hours. I remember the masked man, though. Do you remember him? He's the one who broke through Hagoth and destroyed the incarnation of Mannimarco. What was his name? Krylin? That was the moment when the necromancer took it no more. You have a death wish. Fine, fine. I'll show you. Consider this the punishment that you dared to. BZZZZT. As the necromancer seemed to be letting his minions out of the chamber, John immediately sent a spell rushing through the enemies ahead of him and turned anything in its wake into ash. What was that? Brawling asked as she just witnessed a spell that employed a terrifying rush of lightning, which caused her heart to jump off its place and her eyes to be blinded for a few seconds. Couldn't hold it, John said and moved ahead. Let's go. John went down into the inner sanctum where the necromancer was taking shelter, and the moment he walked in, he raised his staff once again in BZZZZT. He shot another oversized lightning bolt at the shade of a necromancer, which was his second phase boss mode. With the necromancer dead, the place was now returned to Meridia's control, and both John and Bryling had to remove a blade from a pedestal that was blocking the light of Meridia to travel to its goal in the temple. That blade was the ever-famous and most wanted artifact an adventurer would hope to possess. This was the blade that destroys the undead and cleanses the evil, the heroic sword, Dawnbreaker. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.